All right. Well, welcome back to A Hunt Because I'm Hungry's podcast. We're going to be doing a little bit of talking about deer tracking and kind of just a little bit of an agenda of how we got into it and just a whole bunch of stuff. So this might take a while. So I think it's going to be quite interesting once we really get into it, though. But first we'll start with our introductions and we'll go around the table. And we got Mike over here to my left.
So I'm Mike Polito. I run and operate Bodacious Deer Tracking here in east central Kansas, northeast Kansas area. I have been tracking. I'll be going into my third season, and just here to give everybody a little bit of information, kind of tell the story about how we got into it, and spread some knowledge, and hopefully some people learn some stuff. So, thanks for having me.
Cool. Yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah, Ruben Bro. So I run Kansas Outlaw Deer Recovery. I started tracking about a year before Polito, the season before he got into it with Bo. I mean, we live 20 minutes from each other. We talk more to each other during that season than I talk to my wife. So, and in same area and same agenda. I'm just trying to spread the knowledge of deer tracking and the benefits of using a dog.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty helpful tool to have. But I think everyone knows who I am. But I've been tracking as much as I can anyway for the last couple of years. Kind of got into it. Been talking with Mike a lot since I moved here to Kansas. We both kind of got into it around the same time. But he's definitely had a lot more time to actually pursue this than I have, and it's just been kind of, I think I've got maybe 20 tracks total right now, which is not a huge number compared to a lot of other guys, but I mean, you still learn a lot even from one tracks. But these two are pretty much the ones who are going to be spreading the knowledge here. But I just wanted to get them out here to share their story and kind of their experience and what deer tracking allows hunters to do, and that way we can recover more deer and not just let them go to waste. So I think this is a pretty important little podcast to have. But we'll kind of go into how we got started here, and if you all want to share on.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I mean, it's funny because the story actually ties back to Polito. I'm an avid fisherman, and that's where I met Mike. We fished against each other in some tournaments. We fished together a couple times, and I seen pictures of that giant deer that I believe you had on podcast with him a couple months back. Mm-hmm. And he started talking one day. We're sitting at the boat ramp after getting our butt kicked by Milford as usual, and he said something along the lines of, "Man, I wish there was a local dog by to help me find this deer." I had never heard of deer tracking dog ever in my life. Like, I'm not even an avid deer hunter. But it sparked something, and I knew I needed a hobby to do in the off season. I started looking into it. I was like, man, this looks like a lot of fun, and I started doing my research, looking into dogs and everything. And that's kind of what got me started. I had to go through the whole process of finding a dog, the research process. Mm-hmm. I really wanted a bloodhound. Mm-hmm. I love big dogs. Always liked big dogs. Had big dogs my whole life. Did boar hunting with dogs. Couldn't find one to save my life, at least not from a reputable breeder.
Yeah.
Found a coonhound breeder out in Glen Elder, and I mean, everything I read about them, good tame. They were medium-sized dogs, is what I was told, 70 to 80 pounds for the males I was looking for. Great noses, so ended up getting that. Come to find out, the dog ended up being 115 pounds, one of the biggest coonhounds I've ever seen in my life, and I get that a lot, but. Yeah, everything brought me back. Polito really brought me into this. Like him, just that one statement sparked something of interest, and I started doing my research, and that's really what got me into it. So
that's crazy because I didn't even know that. Yeah. But I do remember like standing on the side of the boats, talking, like telling the story, because that was at the time when we were fishing tournaments and stuff, and you and like Jacob Lance and some other people, Jesse Cornell would always ask about the big buck, and it always made me think about like, I had ended up reaching out to a tracker, but he was like 2 hours away, and there was really nobody like local, and I didn't know that trackers drive as much as we do. Now I
yeah, you put a lot of miles on.
Yeah, so my story is a little different. So back in 2016, I was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. And there's a very successful tracker there by the name of Lyle Avis.
Mm-hmm.
And back then I was really big into pig hunting and deer hunting and stuff. And that was kind of when I got started hunting. So I haven't even been hunting very long. But I was there when he got his very first dog, Zeta. She's a Catahoula. And now he's a full-time breeder, and he's got like 6 dogs and just an amazing facility where he raises dogs. I got to visit him about a year ago. But so I carried that. You know, when you see something like that, you'll never forget it when you watch a dog work. And I never, ever forgot it. So then fast forward to 2020 here at Fort Riley, Kansas. You know, I did shoot a really big deer. It ended up being like a single lung liver, single lung, based on my knowledge I know now. We didn't end up finding it that night. It took about a day and a half before I actually found it, and it was only because of vultures that I found it. And I didn't give up. I just wasn't going to give up finding the deer. So the moment that I found that deer, all I thought about for the days after was I remembered Lyle, and I said, I am going to get into tracking, because it was something that was always on the back of my mind, but it's the time thing, right? Because you have to dedicate yourself to it if you're going to do it and do it well. So I was deployed overseas in 2021, and about 3 months before coming back, I just talking to my wife one day, I said, babe, I'm looking for a dog because I'm going to get one. So ended up searching, and I knew that opposite of Ruben here, I knew I wanted a smaller dog for a few reasons. Number one, Kansas is a track-on lead state.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want a big 100-pound dog dragging me through the woods.
Yeah, it kind of makes me regret my decision getting the dog I got.
So I did some research on some of the breeds that are just have the ability to have really strong noses, cold noses. And so I decided I was going to get either a beagle or a wire-haired dachshund. A lot of people call them Teckles. And all I told myself was I'm going to look for the first one I find, and as long as it is from a good breeder, not like a dog mill or anything like that, I was just going to jump on it, right? So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up getting Bo. He'll be 3 this year. He's a beagle. And so that's how I got started into it.
It's funny how one deer led to you and I both on this crazy adventure.
Yeah. The same deer.
Yeah. You know, kind of how I got started too was down at Fort Benning when I was there. You and I were there around the similar time. Mm-hmm. And the first time I shot a buck there, I hit him in the upper portion right below the spine. He dropped down to the ground. He dropped down to the ground before I could get another shot. He took off, and we followed his blood trail for, I don't know, probably 150 yards, and we just called it quits. We'll wait until the morning, and we ended up calling Lyle. Mm-hmm. And watching him work with Zeta was a very interesting experience. I've never seen it. I didn't even know you could really use a dog until my buddy Dave, Bird. Yeah, he hit me up. He's like, "Yep, call Lyle. He'll track." And I was like, "What the hell? What do you mean he'll track?" And he was like, "Yeah, he'll track with his dog." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I didn't even know that was legal. Cool, let's do this." And just watching her work, and she ended up jumping him, and the buck ended up being fine and ran off. But after that, I had one more experience where I made a liver shot, and we were able to watch her work, and we ended up finding him, and he ended up pulling her off, and he was kind of hurting, so I was able to get a second shot into that buck as well. And I was like, okay, that kind of solidifies it. Before I leave Georgia, I'm definitely getting a dog when I'm going to Kansas, because trackers, if you use them, be prepared to spend a little bit of money. It's not a cheap thing to call, especially if they got to travel distance. So I wanted to make sure that I would never lose my own deer ever. So that's kind of why I got into it. And I ended up getting did my own research on athletic breeds and something that I knew was going to have a good nose, and I went with a German short-haired pointer. Yeah. Probably one of the most athletic dogs I've ever seen, and really good nose on them. But again, I kind of wish I went with a little bit smaller dog. because when he pulls and he gets excited and we get close, I mean, it takes almost everything I've got to hold him back. But we'll get into a little bit more deeper here why it's kind of important to have dogs' nose low to the ground and everything.
I just want to add, you brought up a good point that I failed to mention was, the real reason why I got into it was because the feeling I had when I walked up on that buck, it was not just about me, it was about other people, because I know if it happened to me, it's got to be happening to other people. So it was that feeling of I do not want to have this feeling again, and I don't wish this on nobody, because whether it's the kid's first deer, whether it's a big 227-inch deer like I had, I promise the feeling it would be the same. It doesn't matter how big, or if it's your first or your 30th. No hunter wants to lose an animal, so it was just that feeling of kind of like, I guess, remorse for the animal, because as hunters we need to do everything we can to retrieve those animals in a timely manner where we're not wasting the meat and stuff like that.
Especially in states like this during early season when it is so hot. It is almost 100 degrees, so you let that deer lay for more than a couple hours.
Yeah, you got like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe you can extend an hour or two if it's in the shade.
Yeah, you're really cutting it close here early season.
And then coyotes.
Yeah, coyotes. Yeah, coyotes
they win the
awful.
battle.
We'll get into that more, but I mean, hell, you let deer lay here for 45 minutes to an hour, and you can already see the fur in the back.
Yeah. Yep, I've had one on in 15 minutes. I shot a doe, and 15 minutes later there was a coyote on it.
I mean, on that topic though, I mean, I agree. As excited as I get, and every time I find a deer, no matter it's a spike or a 220-inch deer, man, I couldn't imagine the hunter's excitement.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. So, I mean, the fact that they sat there for days on end to kill that animal, I can only imagine the excitement that comes with that. Especially with the thought of maybe they won't get it,
Yeah. I mean, tracking is just such an important thing to do because, like you said, I mean, the hunters put in the time. And, I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to make an awesome shot or a perfect shot every time. I really don't care how long you've been hunting. You've lost deer. You've made bad shots. You've gotten trigger happy, and you just pulled when you weren't supposed to.
90% of my tracks, the tracker will say, "I've never made a bad shot in the 20+ years I've been hunting, or however long it is." I hear it more times. Like everybody's gonna need us at least once, probably. In a lifetime. And
as much time as these hunters put into it, me included, you, and then you said you're getting into bow hunting this year, so. I mean, as much time as you put into trying to get into close range to these mature bucks, I mean, you want to make sure you get your hands on that deer, and it's a lot of times the dog trackers that help you do that. So, such a important tool. But we'll get into the next portion here. It's let's see. So to us. What is deer tracking? Kind of explain it in case nobody really knows. I mean, we've kind of been talking about it a little bit, but in case nobody really knows what deer tracking is, like what is tracking? What are we tracking? Are we tracking blood? Are we tracking other scents? We can kind of dive into that because I know a lot of people are like, oh, you just track blood, and they couldn't be more wrong.
Mike does a seminar on it, and he'd probably be able to speak to the science a little better about it than I can, so I'll open up to him.
So this can go as deep as you want, but we'll try to keep it pretty on the surface here. So base tracking with dogs is assisting hunters in recovering their game that they otherwise likely would not recover, especially in a timely fashion, right? So with that being said, we go through extensive training, not only when we first get our dogs, but a lot of us will do some off-season training, some more than others. There are some very successful trackers that absolutely don't do any off-season training because once these dogs have it figured out, they really have it figured out. I guess what you're doing in the off-season, just trying to keep the dog active more than anything.
Just keeping them wanting it,
Yeah, and then maybe working on some skills, whether it's, extending distance or extending age of the tracks or crossing massive bodies of water that you can't just get across. You've got to stop the dog, get in a vehicle, drive around, right? So you're just thinking of all the scenarios you're going to encounter. But no, tracking is not blood tracking, right? So I always tell people if there was blood, you wouldn't eat us because you got eyes, unless the slight chance that you're colorblind, which I have had some hunters that were colorblind.
Yep.
So,
it's actually more common than you think.
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of, we have a very good resource out there called the United Blood Trackers. And I've asked some people that are members of United Blood Trackers and been members, which I am also myself, and so is Ruben. Why is it called United Blood Trackers? They said, well, because we couldn't call it United Interdigital Gland, fur scent, hide scent, hoofs. You got to give us a name that's easy to understand and
people
the
get
general
it.
population. They don't know what an interdigital gland is, but if they shot something and it's bleeding, they think you can track it. So.
So what our dogs are tracking. You've been in the woods. You've had a doe stomp at you, right? Okay, so what she is doing is she is giving an alert to other deer, right? So when deer are just walking through the woods, they all put out a normal interdigital gland scent. It's kind of how they tell who's who in the woods.
It's their fingerprint.
Yes. Some people will say it's their fingerprint is a scent. They're able to tell who's who in the woods. So when that doe comes under your tree and she wind scents you or she sees you move and she stomps, she is putting down an abnormal amount of that because she is immediately stressed. And because she put down an abnormal amount of that, when she takes off, if 30 minutes later some deer come through there, when they get in proximity, whether they get downwind of it, whether they put their nose on it, they become alert. So it's the same thing that happens when a deer catches an arrow, catches a bullet. It immediately starts to react. Its body goes through some changes. There's some chemical profiles of that interdigital gland scent. I think they say there's like 32 different scent profiles of it or something of that. I don't know the specifics of it. But it then begins to put off a different scent. And that's how our dogs can tell that deer from all other deer in the woods. Because when we're tracking, there's deer, there's coyotes, and all that everywhere. Yeah. So this is why it's important, and we'll get into this later, for hunters to give us a call as soon as possible prior to them pushing a deer. Because just like if they push that deer a mile, that's a mile-long line that a coyote can intercept. Because the coyote does the same thing our dogs do. They're walking through the woods. They cross that path just like our dogs do, or get on it, and they start tracking it. So, our dogs do the same thing, and we'll get into it later, but that is essentially what tracking is. Our dogs will use blood. They will use hide. They will use microorganisms that expel from a wound cavity that we can't see. Anything you can think of, I would imagine, like liquid or saliva from the mouth or the nose. They're tracking every disturbed dirt. Just that deer running or walking, that disturbed dirt is a scent profile. Bo will actually sniff down barbed wire, up and down sticks, because that deer rubs up against it. That's all he needs. But the key that they're really tracking is the interdigital gland scent, which is on all four of the deer's hooves. It's actually on the top, and it secretes a wax-like substance that obviously liquefies as it gets stressed, I would imagine, because of the heat, and then it goes down to the bottom of their hoofs, and that's the scent that they're tracking. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I say, and on the opposite side, I won't pretend like every time a dog shows up, we're going to find a dead deer. As a listener, if you think that's the case, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but it's not. If you're show up to 100 in a year and you're getting 30, you're probably one of the better trackers in the world. But on that same scent pool thing, a deer that's been shot that is not dying, it eventually stops producing that scent. And it's usually about the 150 to 200 yard mark is what I've seen.
Yeah. And you can get some very disgruntled hunters too, because they call the dog, they're going to find their deer. And it's like, brother, like that's just not the case every time.
No, and then I usually within 100 yards, and I've worked with my dog for 4 years, I can tell if we're going to find. I've been surprised a few times, but usually within 100 yards, I can tell if we're going to be on a good trail and there's a possibility to find the deer. That doesn't mean I'm leaving after 15 minutes. I'm going to work for 2-3 hours for you. I'm going to grid search with the dog, essentially, at some point. But as soon as if that deer's not dying, he's not producing that scent anymore, you might still get blood that goes a little further because there's a gaping hole in a deer. And you might be able to follow it, but a lot of times the dogs will actually lose interest after that short period because it's just not a dying deer. It's not producing that scent.
Yeah, I can tell with Bo about the same, probably 100, 150, maybe 200. I really just watch his body language, his gait, his tail, his back legs. He kind of has a hop to him. and then I listen to his nostril sound and stuff. You know, he's a very methodical tracker, and if he starts getting really excited and if I start getting tension on the lead, that typically tells me he's in a chasing mode rather than a tracking mode. So every handler that spends time behind their dog has nuances that their dog will give them when that dog is kind of telling them. There are some trackers that I've talked to that their dog will sit down and turn back and look at them, right? And so, getting behind your dog is
That'd
super
be
important.
nice.
Yeah, but yeah, that just like Ruben said, when that deer immediately gets stressed, whether the arrow hits him or not, he's probably going to put some of that scent off. But you know, nature is amazing, and those deer don't want to keep putting off that scent because guess what? Coyotes are going to track them. Coyotes track sick deer because when sick deer are sick, they're stressed.
Yeah,
that's how they get taken down. That's how they get singled out, and coyotes take them down. So. Yeah, absolutely right. They do relax, and your dog will tell you that.
Yeah. And I think from the first track to kind of, I don't know, probably somewhere around 20. I don't know. I don't keep track of how many I've done.
I've sent you on some interesting ones.
You sure have. But I'll tell you what. I mean, some of these, they've definitely taught me a lot.
Yeah.
They've taught me a lot about dogs, about how they work. It taught me how to read dog. Especially mine, obviously. I haven't seen yours work a whole lot except through some of your GoPro footage that you've done, which is really awesome. I mean, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely hit up his little YouTube channel he's starting. Hopefully it starts to grow. That way people can actually see, like, this is not a slow or this is not a fast process. Don't think it's going to be fast. Sometimes it can be 5 seconds. I mean, I think you had, what, a 2-minute track last year?
I don't know what yours, you said you were describing earlier. I think my shortest track distance-wise was 20 yards.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It was 20
That was
yards.
the one that was laid up under the cedar tree?
No, it was my first track last season. It was a young girl on Fort Riley. Her dad took her out hunting. Yeah. Shot. There was a group of does. It was real quick. She shot. There was a group of does, and in the chaos from the shot, he thought the deer all went left, but the one that she shot, she made a really good shot. It went to the right. He just didn't see it. So he had assumed it went left. So he put a chem light up in the tree. Did everything right. I get there. I put it on, and then, like, Bo goes. He goes to, like, right the trail, and then he, like, goes back out. And then he just loops into the bean field, and it's right there. So it's like 20 yards away. If they would have scanned with a flashlight, they would have saw it. So that was our shortest track. Yeah. So they can be fast.
I say the one with what's his name? That other one.
Rudd.
That, you know, yeah.
Rudd,
Trevor
yeah.
Rudd. Yeah. That was. I mean, it was 20 yards probably. He'd have walked. You could smell the deer as soon as I got in there. I could smell it, so I know the dog was on it.
Yeah.
This year, my shortest was actually one that you'd sent me. And I think maybe it was 60 yards. It was super easy. Like, they didn't know which way the deer went. I got in there was no sign, no blood or anything, so I was just trusting the dog, and we walked right up to it, like, within minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
So let's go into kind of when you get the call. All right. So when you guys get the call, because I'll speak a little bit on it, but I have not gotten as many calls as you guys have, but, you know, you guys are kind of making this into a business, which is awesome. And I'd like to get you guys' feedback as to, like, first call, the hunter explains everything to you, run us through it.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I do a lot. So he and I shared a graphic, I think 2 years ago, that I think we both use. It's a lot of you have probably seen it. It's the alphanumeric code that pretty much identifies where you think your arrow hit is one of them. There's the quartering graphic that we send as well. So usually I'm like, hey, I'm going to send you 2 pictures. I need you to tell me, one, how far away, type of broadhead, type of bow, poundage. Once we get through all that, the quartering shot, the with full penetration, how much does it pass through? Did you find the arrow? Initial reaction of the deer is big. You know, did it mule kick? Did it stoop down? Did it run? Did it walk? But the most important thing, I think, is how far did you walk after you shot? Like, when you went in there, how far did you go?
That's probably one of the most important things to ask. How far did you check?
How soon did you leave the stand and go look, and how far did you go? Probably the 2 most important things. I mean, we're always trying to identify whether or not the deer is going to be fatally shot before. And, I mean, a lot of times they don't care. They just want closure. Like, how Toledo and I will tell them, like, hey, probably not a dead deer. Sounds like you hit no man's land or hit a shoulder shot. That's a pretty common one. Deer's probably going to live if you lost blood after 100. They don't care. They want us to come out. They want closure. They've hunted that deer for however many years.
Yep.
Or, it's the only shot they have. They're leaving state tomorrow. They want closure. So that's what I go through. I mean, I'm sure he keeps a log. He's much more meticulous when it comes to tracking things than I am.
Yeah. One thing I'm big on is like communicating with people, right? So I understand that when you're hunting, you're amped up and stuff like that because we've all been there. So one of the first things I try to do is calm the hunter down, because a lot of times they're amped up and they want to tell you the story. I don't want them to tell me a story. I want to be able to ask the questions so I can use discernment and try to develop what happened in my head. So as they're telling me, I'm asking all these questions. So I go through I basically, I don't even have to think about it. I know exactly. So the first thing I ask is like, what type of weapon? Crossbow, compound, rifle, what type of broadhead? That way I understand cut diameter and stuff like that. And then I start asking like elevated, on the ground, how far, angle of the deer, all that type of stuff. And then it goes into more specifics. How did the deer react? How far could you see it go? How long did you wait to get down? Do you have your arrow? What's the arrow look like? Do you have pictures of it? Make sure they're clear. Please send them to me. The first thing I do, though, is send those 2 pictures. And I want to understand like what the hunter is thinking and what he remembers. And then I'm really trying to gauge their experience, right? Because hunters can say certain things that let you know that they're an experienced hunter. And so it's not that I don't want to trust them, but my goal at the end of the day is to find their deer. So I want to go in with the most amount of knowledge and the most amount of trust in what they said to me. And they're either going to have that trust based on what they're telling me and how they're telling me, or based on the questions I ask and how precisely they can answer it. So really, when we get on the ground, we want to have as much information as possible so we understand how to approach it. Or, the other hand, how long do we need to wait? If you tell me your arrow smells like gut, I am not coming under 12 hours unless it's early season, because then we're considering harvesting the meat and stuff like that. So we'll push it. Some gut shot deer, and they could be shot in multiple organs, but if your arrow smells like gut, I'm treating it as a gut shot deer. I've tracked them as 6 hours and they were dead, but they can live over 24 hours.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're doing. We're trying to paint the picture, and then we had always advise the hunter. Like Ruben said, multiple people call them based on what they tell me. If they tell me, hey, I know I hit high. As soon as I hit the arrow hit the deer dropped, and then 10 seconds later he got up and took it off. It's spinal shock. That deer is 99.9% chance he's fine, he's going to live. And we have some hunters that say, absolutely, I trust you. Or we have some that say,
it's a giant. Can you
please come? Can you come? And I feel bad because, based on distance, we kind of charge the same. Based on distance, it depends our rate. And I don't want to just make money off of it. And I always tell people, it is your decision. The ball's in your court. So most of the tracks we do go out based on what they tell us. But there's I would say maybe 20%. We try to advise the hunters off of it just based on what they tell us.
Plus, that puts us in the field when there's another opportunity for another deer that we might have more confidence is dead. I'm out there tracking a spinal shock deer that I'm almost certain is going to live. I'm missing the call from Billy from Nebraska that's got a 220-inch deer that would live her, but there's no tracker available.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So you get multiple calls, you got to prioritize. And unfortunately, the thing, I understand your deer's probably dead. You explained everything, and it sounds like you have a dead deer. However, I have like 3 people in front of you. So I'm going to get to them, and then I will get to you.
I think we do a good job at sharing locally, too. I talked to Mike. We have James, who tracks locally as well. There's a couple others that we share with.
Shaden down in McPherson.
Yeah, the community's grown almost to the point where it's actually made it
now.
look too bad. I think we've dialed back. Our hunting tracker MAC this year has been restricted a little more. Last year it was so saturated, and a lot of people got a sour taste in their mouth from unexperienced trackers just trying to collect money. But I will only share with my friends that I'm confident can track a deer. He's a little more confident with some people he know. Maybe giving, like I said, I didn't met you till today. I probably wouldn't have given you a track, unfortunately. But no,
Yeah, it's
nothing against you.
It's a reputation thing, right? So like we both have Facebook pages. We've got hundreds of people that follow us, and you make a name for yourself. And the hunting community is small, you know. So like I've tracked probably 15 deer down in Marion. So if there's a deer that goes down in Marion, it's likely that I'm gonna get the call because it's a pretty small community. There's a lot of hunters there, but like I don't. It's just like Ruben said, you know, like there's a group of people, about 5. You know, Ruben, James, Shaden, Swain, you, if it's local, because I know you don't get as much time. And then I know we know all the trackers in Kansas. We have a great Facebook page called the Kansas Deer Recovery page. It's got an interactive map. You can click on your location and find the closest tracker. But we do have to work together because, like you said, you know, second week in November through the end of November, I mean, I probably get 10 calls a day. A couple of those I'll talk off just based on what they tell me. They may call from 3 hours away. Their buddy last year used me 30 minutes away, but they're on some property 3 hours away. I'm probably not driving 3 hours because, like Ruben said, if I drive 3 hours, I may lose 2 local tracks. And so, and then I'm driving into another tracker's area. So we all work together, but there's times in the middle of November where every single tracker that's out there tracking, you know, day in and day out, we're so busy to where I may have to drive 3 hours. Last year I took a track in Lee Summit, Missouri. He wanted me to come out. His buddy recommended me, and he's like, I'm paying you to come out. So we went out and found the deer in 30 minutes in the pond. So we get very busy, but working together is great. That's one thing I love about it. The community is so tight, and everybody kind of knows everybody. It makes it a little bit more rewarding because when we're driving during season, it's nonstop. I got a tablet, I got an iPad in my truck, and I got to answer calls, and I'm, you know, so
yeah. I mean, there's been some times where I've just seen some people on the side of the road. Like, I'll admit, I'm a hunter first. I'm a hunter first, and I will not really pick up deer tracking unless I'm not doing anything until I've harvested my deer. Until I've harvested the buck, because I put in a lot of time during the summer to scout, and until I harvest that's my main focus. This isn't a business for me. I'm just here to help, maybe take a couple tracks off of you if you've got 5 and you're like, dude, I can't do this one. I'm like, all right, cool, I got you.
Yeah, man, it all helps. I mean, you're helping somebody. So
yeah. So I don't have the experience that you guys have, but I just want to make sure that everyone is taken care of here as best we possibly can, because it is a gut-wrenching feeling here. Especially on post. I mean, you got a lot of guys who are just getting into hunting here. There's a lot of new hunters here that hunt on Fort Riley, and some people would probably say, oh, well, they should probably know. Well, the only way they're going to find out is if they make the mistakes. That's the unfortunate part of hunting. Like, nobody here, like I said earlier, was perfect or will ever be perfect.
No. I'll never judge you. I've never shot a deer with a bow. So if you made a bad shot, I'm going to take your word for it, brother. We're going to get out there.
Absolutely. And that's one thing he kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of hunters will tell us, man, I've never, you know, and I try to assure people that when I'm on that phone call, I just need you to be 100% honest with me, especially when we get into the question of, did you track the deer? How many people, how long after, and how far? Did you physically bump the deer, whether you heard it, saw it, smelled it, whatever? Because I want people to be confident that, like, I am not judging you. I'm doing it for a reason. I'm not tracking well-shot deer 99% of the time. So help me help you. Help us trackers help you, because we get a joy out of it. Our dogs enjoy it, and then at the end of the day, you're going to harvest. You have the highest probability of recovering your deer if you
so back to your point of where the dogs enjoyed it. So I remember having a pretty long conversation with you last year. We just kind of talked for a while, and you're like, man, it's been almost 10 calls, maybe 15 tracks, and you're like, we have not found the deer.
I remember that slump.
And you're like, I don't know if Bo is like just losing interest in this. And we kind of talked about how to make it fun and maybe have a reward, even though he didn't find it at the end, but at least rewarding him to keep his mind going and to keep his, his, I want to do this. That's tough when the dog is out there and they don't find what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They end up going, well, I don't really want to take this serious anymore. And I mean, they're just like us. If we're going expecting a reward at the end, but we don't get it, it's hard to keep the dog into it. Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand that too. Like it's not just taxing on you guys, it's taxing on your dog.
Oh, absolutely.
Because dogs want the reward at the end.
Yeah.
You guys understand, we all understand that we may not find it. The dog has no idea. The dog thinks I'm going to find whatever I'm smelling.
Yeah.
And then when they start losing interest in it, and then you start realizing, oh man, shit, we're not going to find the deer.
Yeah.
Now the dog's like, oh, kind of let down. And
I don't have that issue with mine.
No?
No, man. I can tell if whether or not he's on that deer, we're gonna find it.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he's done with it, bro, he don't matter, dead or alive. He will track a dead deer first, but after that, he's on a hot deer trail.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. He's going to find a live deer. He's gonna find a deer.
Yeah.
And he's just pissed off at me that I pulled him off the track that he wants to go chase.
And that's kind of similar with my crazy ass dog. He's nuts, but I mean, he's just so high strung anyway. He doesn't really care. But I mean, there are a lot of dogs out there, like, they need that reward and they need something to make them kind of keep the will or the want to do it.
I mean, we've been in slumps, don't get me wrong. I mean, it hurts my feelings more than it hurts the dog. I can tell that because he's ready to go to work no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, he's through and through deer. That dog eats deer dog food. He chews on deer legs as toys. Like all he wants is to be out there chasing deer, whether it's dead or alive. So as long as he's in the truck or with me on the trail, he's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'm the same. I think Bo is exactly the same. He just wants to be out in the woods smelling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If he finds a deer, it's a bonus. I think I get more emotional about it because I'm extremely dedicated to this, and I want to find deer.
It definitely makes you start overthinking things.
I lose sleep.
Honest.
I lose sleep during tracking season.
Yeah.
Like, where did I mess up? I know the dog did mess up. What did I do wrong?
But that's even if we messed up.
Yeah.
But even though, because we'll track deer.
Well, you start second guessing. You're like,
Yeah.
man, maybe I did mess up. You're like, oh, man.
And on that point, like Ruben said earlier, we don't find all the deer. So leaving dead deer in the woods is a fact. The greatest trackers in the country, they've lost deer every season, most likely. But it's an extremely small number. I'll speak for myself. I have went on a total of 201 tracks in 2 seasons, and I've left 5 deer in the woods. So that's like 1%, I think. Yeah. Something like that. I'm not a mathematical genius, but it's extremely low considering the number. Now, if you're a beginning tracker and you're leaving, deer in the woods, probably want to take a step back and work on some things, reach out to some seasoned trackers, because I did that last year. We left in the span of about 3 weeks. I got notified of 2, and immediately I'm like, what is going on? And I reached out to so many experienced trackers, and just Ruben, James, Shaden, and I was just, because I was like emotionally like disturbed, and everybody kind of just told me, because we were tracking like every day nonstop, and I kind of knew the answer, but I needed somebody else to kind of tell it to me. I needed multiple people to tell it to me, because
it's just that reassurance,
And me and Bo took a 3-day hiatus, and I had my buddy Brad lay a mock track, a nice, typical 800-yard, 18-hour, 24-hour-old track, and we went out there and Bo aced it, and I was like, we're good. We're back on the saddle, and then we were back on fire. So it's like you said, Bo may have gotten to a place where he was being overworked, which was my fault. Or he was just getting bored of it because we were just doing it. I wasn't giving him a break. I probably wasn't making it fun. So now I always just make it fun. I just try to be more lively instead of like all business. And that was something that I had to learn that season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you did a lot of tracking last year. I think you doubled as many as I did. So I have a set routine. I'm 3 on, 1 off for days. No matter how many calls I'm getting on that day off, I'm gonna pass him off. For one, based on how fast my dog tracks and how much
heavy he is.
Yeah, dude. I mean, as fast as he moves and as much as we track, I need a recovery day. I know he needs it. I
mean, you guys are out all hours of the night. I mean,
all night.
I don't do night tracks. I gave them up.
Yeah.
I cannot see at night. Save my life.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do that 3 on, 1 off. I only track during the day now. I mean, I just lose too much at night. Like, I'm a very visual guy. I mean, and I'm looking for pin drops because I trust my dog. but I'm also looking for something to assure myself
Yeah,
because
visual
of how
assurance.
fast he is to spot check him. Because I mean, I can read him well. I know when he needs help. For me, I know when he's off trail. But if I don't have that visual identification of where last blood was, I can't reset, and I cannot see at night to save my life, like I said.
Yeah.
But back to the left deer in the woods, man. Like last year was my worst. I left 2 last year. And like I took half as many tracks as you, so statistically we're probably about the same. One you and I both took. I don't even know how you count that one. I'll take it on as a hit for me.
Yeah.
I know you just went out to check it, but neither one of our dogs could find. I don't know if it was a scent pool.
Yeah.
That was a weird one, man.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. And it wasn't far. He was from where our dogs tracked. It was 400 yards away.
Man, there was a huge area where those elk had.
Yeah, it was a lot of elk.
Yeah, a ton of elk. Just a lot of elk sign. And there was one patch of blood leading into a cut cornfield. And my dog went through the cornfield, and then he turned left. When we went through a bunch of tree lines. We went through there. His dog followed the same line as mine, and it could have been our scent that he was following too. Yeah. But that deer, where we turned left, that deer was 40 yards to the right. Yeah. And no idea why we didn't pick that up.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing about this. I always tell people nature has a say, and like I thought about that track a lot after it. And sometimes there's things that probably happen that we don't know about. So something that I consider played through my head, whether it's true or not. I consider like maybe sometimes when a deer gets a liver shot or a gut shot, just like deer that know they're going to be okay, they stop putting off that scent. I wonder if sometimes a deer that's big, mature, burly, tough, I wonder if they can just start to relax. I mean, there's no scientific answer to any of this. There are no guarantees in tracking, and not every deer that you think's going to die is going to die, and not every deer that you think should live is going to live. So
it was early season too, so I mean the dogs could have been rusty. It could have been dog's fault, could have been my fault. Who knows?
Well, our dogs took the exact line because we sent the pictures of the track to each other, and we was like, "What the hell?" So that was one of those odd ones.
So it's funny. It's funny you say that because I think maybe we should start talking about the conditions because you said it was early season.
Yeah.
Maybe conditions always have a play in everything, whether it's real hot, or it's wet. If it washes the scent and everything. So we can kind of start going into that kind of from that track. If you want to go back to that track and
I think
kind
I
of
actually
explain.
took that one midday. Because, I mean, it sounded like a banger to me. Like
it was hot.
I think
was
you
it
were
hot
early
and dry?
afternoon.
Yeah, it was like
afternoon.
2 o'clock probably. It was hot, but not like overly hot.
No,
and I normally wouldn't take. I love evening tracks. I catch it. It'll be hot to start, but it's gradually getting cooler as the sun goes down.
Cool
That's my
wind's
favorite
dropping.
time. Yep. Any blood will have dried.
Yep.
I'll be able to see it as long as the wind's not blowing crazy around. Just my preferred is the afternoons, and I mean I think heat actually helps scent, and I think that's scientifically correct. I could be wrong, but I mean, I know water holds it, but if something's hot, naturally it produces fumes.
I think it helps it, or it helps if it's more humid too, and as opposed to a dry heat. So again, back into the conditions of everything. Like if you kind of just want to talk through the conditions of one of that track, and then some of your hardest tracks in those conditions, and then some of your easier tracks in those conditions. You might have to think about it for a second.
No, I'll say, I mean, heat-wise, wet, cold, doesn't really. My favorite is just me being comfortable. I don't think it affects my dog as much as maybe some other people think it does. I just haven't noticed that. I mean, I've taken them in the pouring rain and been comfortable following. Just I can't see because it's
it's
everything's washed out. Yeah. Taking heated day 2 o'clock through cornfields with no shade and been perfectly fine. I will say my favorite, I guess, conditions as far as where to track is tree lines. I love tree lines. My least favorite is going to be a cornfield, or Milo is probably.
Milo.
Oh my god.
Standing Milos.
But tree lines with shade and leaves on the ground is the perfect conditions for tracking, in my opinion. Like anywhere there's a creek or something like that with overgrown trees. Temperature-wise, I'm unfazed, and I don't think it affects the dog other than if I got to go multiple miles, that's probably where I would be concerned about heat.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people get it mixed up. They think, oh, it's pouring rain, it's going to wash the scent completely out.
It'll move it some, but
right.
I mean,
I think it actually spreads it a little bit easier sometimes. The wetter it is, the more scent now is spreading out, and it's easier for your dog, I think, to have a bigger trail than a smaller one. And if they veer off, they're not veering too far. You know what I mean?
So so a couple of things that are going to hurt. Two things for sure that are going to hurt scent on the ground is going to be high heat and wind with no humidity. So moisture is trackers. We love it, right? So obviously, if we get a 5-inch torrential downpour, that's going to be tough because it's going to wash stuff near and far and wide. I give the analogy of oil slick, right? So you go out and you change oil of your truck down in the driveway, and you try to take the hose. Well, if you watch where that oil was, you get that oil slick kind of visual. That's the same thing that I believe happens with scent. That deer walks in a 18-inch spacing where his hooves are, and you put some moisture down. It's just kind of spread it out. So it absolutely helps. Another thing that really hurts is hard frozen ground. So during the dead of the winter where the ground is frozen solid, I'm not tracking. I'm going to wait till a little bit later in the day, and it just needs to thaw just a little bit.
It just needs to warm up.
If it's a sheet of ice, that scent is locked down there, and you're not going to pick it up. But snow, water, mud, that doesn't affect the dog at all. Any type of moisture at all is going to help. So extremely frozen, high temperatures, and coupled with high wind, it's just going to throw that scent all over. The only caveat to high temperature is if you've got a carcass, right? Because now you've got a carcass out there that is just emitting scent because of the heat and what it does to wounds and guts and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So your dog is more apt to, if you can just get close to that animal, he's more apt to pick up that scent because it's foul. I mean, I've smelled deer 200 yards away. Imagine what the dog could smell. So that's the one
even
benefit
live deer
to heat.
when it's heat. So Terry Young, I believe, I tracked his deer. I believe you know him, don't you, Terry?
Yeah.
We tracked his deer 2, maybe 3 years ago. I think it was my second year tracking. Might have been the first. But, dude, we get out there, and Robert's hot. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. I kind of knew him at that point, the dog, but not really great. But I'm letting him run. And at that point, I'm resetting a lot because if I don't have visual, I don't have a lot of trust in the dog yet. If I don't have a visual, I'm going to pull you off. And I ended up pulling him off 2 or 3 times. And he was maybe 15 yards off with him. I ended up finding the actual track. But that dog was taking a beeline. After we found the deer, we jumped him alive, and then he moved maybe 20 yards and fell over dead. But that dog was taking a beeline straight to that deer. And he was probably 120 yards away, but he knew where that deer was. From the time we stepped in the woods, he wanted to go. Because he can, the heat, it was a hot day. We were sweating getting out there. I think it was a 1.5 mile walk. I mean, as soon as I said, find it, dude, that dog just peeled off.
That's funny you say that because that track you gave me for that younger dude last year, I think it was middle of November. The guy had shot him, and it was the night that you had the buck that you were tracking, arrow still with the lighted knock in it, and I had found that buck that those two had shot. With the knock still in it and running away too. And I was like, that's kind of a weird coincidence on the same night. But my dog, that track, when I got in there, started going up this way, completely opposite where the buck had actually run. And I was like, that's weird because the blood trail literally starts going off this way. So I just was like, nah, I don't think so. It's just not right. And even the hunters are like, no, he went this way. And I was like, okay, cool. So we followed his trail. However, at the end of that track, it led us right to behind their stand into this little cedar thicket where my dog had ended up actually jumping the deer again. And when I go back to the start of the track, it was literally straight behind about 80 yards. So that buck went up, circled all the way back around, and then came back and laid behind that stand.
That's funny. I had something similar this past year.
Wild.
I had a fella call me, and I get out there, and he's bringing me down to a creek, and Robert starts pulling hard to the left, super. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Come on, let's go. Cut it out. I let him walk a little bit, try to wear him out, come back, puts me on the trail. Dude, we take it 1.5 miles around the cornfield. The whole edge, it comes back, cuts straight through the cornfield, over to the creek, and then we lose blood. The dog's trying to, bring me down to the creek and stuff, so I go down, don't see anything, come back. Finally, it was probably 2 hours in. I'm like, look, man, like, I'm not sure. Like, there's multiple blood trails going multiple directions. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, let's go reset. We're going to walk back to the creek. We start chatting there. Robert starts pulling again. And this is, 40 yards from his blind. And we went in, around, all the way around, back to the creek. I'm like, I'm just going to let him go, see what we can. But we moved 20 yards and that deer's right there. Like, I was like, what the heck? We'd have found the deer in 2 minutes if I'd have just trusted that dog off Jump Street.
Yeah.
But I mean,
sometimes it's hard. You know, it's just hard to be like, well, you listen to the story that the hunter's giving you. You listen to the direction that they're telling you he went. You have a visual where the blood's going, and you're like, no, there's no way. My dog's just on a different deer, or he's on a different scent. So you want to find it, and you want to trust your dog. But at the same time, if you had actually trusted your dog, you would have found it anyway. And it's just...
I've messed up the dog more than he's messed up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've definitely made corrections where I'm like, man, maybe I should not have made that because you found it,
One thing I do, as soon as I get to the hit site, the first thing I do is check the wind. I carry a wind checker because... that is going to tell me because I've watched Bo stand up on his back legs and wind scent, or he'll just lift and he'll do like 3 head nods. So I want to know where the wind is because I want Bo's nose down. I want him tracking the interdigital gland scent of that deer. But if I get to the hit site and I check the wind and Bo is nosing in the direction of upwind, I'm going to trust him. If he is not, then I'm going to put him on that trail and make him work it. And then I'll come back like Ruben did to do wind scenting. Wind scenting is always going to be my last option because especially if it's been a long time since that deer was shot. But my philosophy is I want Bo's nose to the ground. I want him tracking that deer. I don't care if I got to track it at 3/4 of a mile and come back and he's 50 yards to the left. Yeah. But there have been situations where we have wind scented a deer just like that and he's 75 yards away. And I only knew that because I checked that wind, he's nosing up, and I just say, I know you watch your deer go that way, but we're going to go this way real quick, and 10 minutes later, we're on the deer.
This year, I've gotten a lot more comfortable doing that. I've done it. I mean, I've talked about it. I didn't have a lot of success in my first couple of years, but this past year, we've run up on trails where blood ended. I've worked the wind after talking with you on recommendations, and, we'll go over there, and he'll be walking, and that head just turns, and he's hot. I'm like, okay, let's go. And then we've come up on blood trails or we've come up on deer after the fact where they stopped bleeding but still went 200 yards. It's something I've gotten a lot more comfortable with this year. I'm not comfortable doing that. I have not had the amount of experience that you guys have had. My dog's still super young. He just turned 2 years old. So, I mean, I think maybe this year I'm gonna really try to hit it a little bit harder. I've been working with him a little bit this summer. He's definitely calmed down enough to where I can control him better. You're heading to Pennsylvania, aren't you?
I am.
Is that a lead on?
I think so. Most of the Northeast states are all on lead.
Yeah, most states there. It's mostly southern states that allow them off,
a lot of your
off
southern
lead.
Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama.
I tell him all the time. I think if I could run off lead with my dog and just follow him on Garmin, bro, we'd probably I won't say we'd find more, but I'd be able to work it faster.
You'd probably find
maybe find
based
some.
on the stats between on lead and off lead.
If we could push them, if they allowed me to push deer legally, our percentage would go up way higher. Yeah.
Well, honestly, I think it takes so long, and I think some of these places that these deer go, and especially the doe, because they don't have to worry about the racks getting hung up, so they go and. Like, you got to go under here. You're, like, trying to feed your lead through all this stuff, and you're trying not to get hung up, and next thing you know, you're in a briar, and you're just all caught up, and you're like...
I almost lost my dog the first year jumping over. I did lose him that one year. I was just on a walk, though. We jumped a live deer one time, and he took off while I was with my son, and it took me 4 hours to find it. It was like midnight. Yeah, but I was tracking one, and I go over a barbed wire fence, and I was like, hey, hold up. He turns around and looks at me. He's hanging out. And then he turns his head real high, and that deer jumped. I guess we were within 20 feet of it and didn't realize it. And, dude, he was gone. I was, climbing over a barbed wire fence. Luckily, that deer turned around and came back. So he took that, and my dog was on his heels, within 10 feet. I firmly believe we could push deer. I would increase my statistics drastically, but that dog's just so athletic and fast. But luckily, that dog came back to me, and that was before I started running a Garmin. Now, if I beep, he'll stop at the head of his track no matter what he's doing.
It's funny you say that. Very first track that we actually had a successful find at the end, it was just a little fawn the guy shot, and I'm just like, okay. We ended up tracking, but my dog had never been around a live deer up close. And it wasn't so alive until he got up to it, and about 5 feet from it, it threw itself up. And then he Scooby-Dooed his way out of there. I'm telling you, he's gone. He pulled the lead right out of my hands, and he went down into that deep drop-off into these creeks that are around here, just straight down. And I didn't hear him, didn't see him. The deer ended up going over there, and we watched it, and for about another 30 minutes, and it finally laid down and put its head down and died. But I'm like, where's my dog? You know? And it took me a while, but I'm glad I had my electric collar on, and I was able to vibrate him back, and he came back. He just couldn't get up the cliff. So I had to go down and around and pull him up, basically yank him up by his harness and throw him up the cliff. And but
say that's one of the downfalls of big. I've been pulled down those before on high trails. Yeah, especially that's why I don't track at night. I can't see that. He'll go. He ain't telling me it's coming. I find out the hard way.
Yeah, they're on 4 legs. We're on 2. I mean, it's a little different. That's funny. But let's talk about some common mistakes made by the hunters. This is a big one. I think if anyone's watching this or if anyone's listening to this, I think this is one of the biggest things that we need to talk about, because the success of a track a lot of time comes from the mistakes or the mistakes the hunters don't make. So if y'all want to talk about that, kind of the pros of good hunters and kind of experienced hunters, and then the cons of inexperienced hunters, or let's just say guys who like to call their buddy list when they shoot a deer. So Mike knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so here's where it really begins. It begins before season ever starts. So a couple things hunters can do to really help themselves. Number one, if you're hunting properties where you've got adjacent properties, you need to have already made contact with adjacent property owners. We're in Kansas. Most places where you're hunting, everybody around you hunts. So you're going to have very few instances where somebody is not going to give you permission to go after a wounded deer. But the best thing you do is make contact with those adjacent landowners prior to, so that you know that in the instance you can just give them a quick buzz, send them a text message and say, hey, I did shoot a deer and I've got a tracker coming and my goods is still across that property line. That's first and foremost. Number two is have some contacts, whether it's just numbers, their Facebook contacts, so you can hit them up on Messenger. But know a couple of the trackers in your area. If you want to go ahead and call them ahead of season, I've had a hunter from out of state that called me before. He said, hey, I'm coming into the area. They send me a message. This is when I'll be there. You're going to be available to track. So having property owners' permission or just knowledge of who they are, having their contact, and then trackers' contacts. I think those are two extremely important things to have, because if you're, last minute trying to find it, or you don't have that already in your back pocket, I think that's when hunters are more apt to go in and keep searching. And even though in the back of their mind they're going, I should probably back out, they go another 25 and then another 50, and then they're at 150 and they bump it and it takes off when it would have just died right there. So
it's the hardest thing to get an excited hunter to just hold back.
Yeah, so that's, I think, to me, what I have learned is extremely important. I think hunters know. I always tell people, when the first time your mind starts telling you or questioning or doubting, that is when you need to stop, back out, loop out, and call somebody. Whether it's a buddy who has a lot more knowledge on tracking deer.
Real quick, hit up on that loop out.
Yeah, so
a lot of people aren't going to understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, so you don't want to, when you're tracking, you don't want to be walking right where the blood is. Stand off 3 yards to the left, to the right, and use a light and kind of trail it, kind of run parallel to it. But when you do decide to back out, don't just turn around and walk out. Any scent that you may have stepped on, you are now taking that with you. So making a loop out is just basically doing a big half moon to get out. If it takes you another 20 minutes to get out of the woods, and so be it. You're preserving any scent that could be on the ground for the dogs to come in, make our jobs as easy as possible. So the sooner you can pull out, the better. And again, most trackers that I know are not out there just to make a buck. We are out there to recover your deer. And I mean, I've done tracks for $10. I've done tracks for nothing. If somebody's truly hurting and they say, man, I need you, I'm going to come. I'm sorry, but I'm going to come. So we want you to do everything you can to preserve that trail. So
it's just respectful for
pulling
the deer,
out as quick as possible, marking stuff, not on your phone because your pins are always going to be off. Toilet paper, I've had people leave parts of clothing. I've heard I had somebody take their hat, or I had somebody take their sock off and tie it off to a branch. Mark the first and the last is extremely important. That gives us A and B, and we can tell if our dogs are on it and all that.
If you have your arrow, use that because it's going to hold the most scent for that deer.
Yeah,
so
don't take it out of the woods. Put it in the ground. Leave it. Don't worry about your broadhead. Put it in the ground, whatever, and just try to look at it like CSI. We're trying to preserve a crime scene. All evidence is important for us and our dogs, so whatever you can do to preserve that, extremely important. That's really all you can do. Pushing a deer, keep wanting to push it and push it and push it, is the worst thing you can do. A deer can be gut shot, and I say there's a bubble. I say typical gut or liver shot deer are going to die inside, and from statistically what I've seen, inside of about a 300, 350 yard bubble. If you push that deer can go as far as it wants to go to where it thinks it needs to get to survive. And so that is the longer line, like I talked about earlier, for coyotes to intercept it. Well, guess what if a coyote intercepts and that deer's still lively? That coyote is now pushing that deer.
Yep.
So a deer that could have been found in 15 minutes could be 3.5 miles, and it can cross 16 property lines, and we're just not going to find it. We've all done long tracks, but that just reduces probability drastically. So
I love
that's really
gut shot deer.
Yeah,
that's my favorite track.
They're typically slam dunks. Yeah. So and I think most hunters know this, but I think when you're in the moment, because there's lots of podcasts out there, people talking about lost deer. So this is in hunters in their mind. I think they know it. They talk about it. It's kind of like we want to start a tracking podcast, but I think they just get worked up and the excitement takes over, and we all understand that because I've been there, you've been there, you're about to probably be there, but now you got a dog, so you're just probably going to track everything with it, or you're going to get into bow hunting, and if the deer doesn't drop, I don't care if it goes 50 yards, I'm going to get
I'm going to get the dog,
or get my new dog.
Yep.
So this knowledge is out there. I just think hunters, just make the right call. But at the end of the day, if you want to track your own deer, by all means, there is nothing wrong with that. But just preserve it as best you can, so that if in fact you do have to call out a dog, we have the highest probability of recovery. So if you want to hit anything,
I say so. From a tracker piece, I think you nailed it. I think a lot of it, and not coming from a hunter. Like I just started shooting a bow less than 6 months ago. Understand how comfortable you are hitting something, and know that you're not on the outdoor channel.
Yeah.
Like there's everybody wants to that right behind notch it right behind the shoulder. Deer's dead within 20. I could not tell you. I have never hit like in a 3-inch circle more than twice in a row, and that's standing in my front yard, not elevated. So
not nervous, not shaking. It's 20
there's
degrees.
Not a 180-inch deer in front of me, or I'm cold.
I've been sitting in the tree for 6 hours.
Yeah, right.
Stiff.
So I will say that. If you're from a hunter, if you're looking at increasing the chances of finding your deer and you're comfortable calling a dog, kick that thing back, go double lung. Yep. I think a double lung with a dog tracking, and even without the dog tracking, will probably increase a lot of chances at finding everyone's deer. Yep. It's going to increase your chances, and it's definitely going to help deer tracking dogs. Because there's a lot more room for error back there. Like you go a little low and you're in the guts, and you just got to wait a little longer. It might suck early in the year, but if it's a trophy deer, you might spoil some meat, but you got the trophy. Some people are trophy hunters. Let's be honest here. Not everyone's out there to harvest because they're hungry. I'm all about deer meat.
Yeah.
But you'll definitely increase the chances knowing how good you are shooting, and especially under stress.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be perfect for you. You've had so much experience now tracking as a new hunter, like with a bow. you've learned so much from other people's mistakes already. And so I think, honestly, even you just noticing that and saying, you know, no one's going to hit here every time, go for the bigger double lung shot and everything. I mean, that's already speaking like an experienced hunter. You know, you know your scenario, know your situation, know the angled shots that you need to take, the angled shots you need to probably not take.
Yeah.
So
I've seen hundreds of shoulder shot mech blade, like bent mech blades from shoulder shots.
Yeah.
I've seen that. That would probably accounts for almost 60% of the calls I get.
if they don't cut on contact, they're usually the first ones to call.
We talk about, you know, you brought up the hunter side of it. I more talked about like the tracking side or the pulling out, but we talk about like shots and shot angles. The number one deer that survives 99.9% of the time their shot is going to be that shoulder shot deer with a mechanical broadhead. And it's just the reality. I know people love mechanicals, but they just do not punch through hard bone. They're not cut on contact. Typically, I find people shooting mechanicals or shooting a lighter arrow setup, so they got less kinetic energy, less forward to center. And there's nothing wrong with those arrows. Shoot what you're comfortable with, but understand if you aim to put it right behind the shoulder and you're off to the inch to the left, 2 inches to the left or a little bit high, and you hit that shoulder, if you hear a real hard crack and it penetrates 2 to 3 inches, we're going to probably tell you 9 times out of 10, I don't recommend us coming because that deer is going to be alive, but we'll always come if we want. But yeah, I would aim for the bigger target. Multiple vitals is what's going to kill a deer. Rapid blood loss or multiple vitals. So understanding quartering away, quartering to where you actually need to put your shot. Yet I'm right there with Ruben. I am so much more confident in my hunting because I understand deer anatomy. I've seen hundreds of arrows through deer, and I know where the highest probability is. If I can shoot single lung, liver, gut, that is a higher probability death because I'm killing multiple, or I'm penetrating multiple organs. I'm not aiming for the heart. I'm aiming for the center of both lungs.
That and you know a guy with a dog.
Yeah. But yeah, like, you know, and I think he said it, you know, a lot of people ask me, like, why do you think everybody shoots for the heart? Well, I think they watch all these hunting shows and these guys, these, you know, Levi Morgans, and these guys shoot professionally.
Yeah.
This is what they've been doing. They can put an arrow on
Chris
top
B,
of each other every
Chris B,
time.
yeah.
And
Again,
they're hunting,
another professional archer.
Yeah, and they kill so many deer in a year. They travel all over the country. So they're arrowing.
It's social media, man.
Yeah, they're arrowing 10, 15, 20 big mature bucks. So maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think a guy like, you know, Levi Morgan or all these, you know, big names in the industry, I think they're so relaxed in the tree. I think it's second nature to them. Whereas the average hunter probably gets super worked up, right? I always say this to people, like, think of the worst case scenario. You're in your tree stand, it's 20 degrees, you didn't wear enough because you're like, man, I don't want to sweat going to the tree stand. So now you're in the tree stand, you're freezing your butt off, you're shivering, and then you got to pee. So you get up, you got to go pee, and then you're like, no, I don't want to move. It's like prime time. I don't want to pee. I'm shivering. My shoulders are getting tight. And here comes this deer. So I'm cold. I got to go pee. And now I'm worked up because the buck I'm after. So that's 3 things fighting against you. Now you got to make the perfect shot. So,
I mean, that was one of the reasons why, not to mention my shoulder issues, but that's another reason why I went down to 60 pounds on the last bow I had. I went back to 70 this year, but the last bow I had was 60 pounds because the previous bow I had was 70, and I've been in that exact scenario.
It's cold, and you try to draw.
You can't pull your bow back.
Yeah.
You literally get to the point where you're like, I've never had this issue before. But you've been in the tree now for 6 hours. It's 25 degrees. You're cold. You've been bundled up, sitting there with your hands in your pocket like this, and you're shivering.
You left
that
the layer
deer comes in.
You left the layer you should have worn at the truck.
Correct. Or you're like, man, I forgot it, you know?
Yeah,
But, you know, same thing, though. I mean, I couldn't pull it back. So I got to know, you know, I, again, learned from that. And I ended up being able to pull my bow back eventually. However, didn't make a great shot because it was painful.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're a pretty big dude. Like, you're not a small guy.
Yeah.
So I'm the same way.
Sucked.
I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1", 220 pounds. I shoot between 60 and 63 pounds, and I'm shooting a 520 grain arrow, and it blasted through the elk that I shot. You were there.
Yeah,
blasted right through her
I
shoulder.
never had
So
any issues with the size deer that are here.
No.
Both my bucks were over 200 pounds.
Yeah.
They're built different out here.
They sure as hell are.
They're built
and but I'm telling you, like, a lot of these guys, I need to have an 80 pound air or bow. You know, it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
A 50 pound bow will do it.
Yeah.
My wife's shooting, I think she's shooting 48 pounds, and she's still able to get the penetration.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, these people, and again, it's because these guys who are professional, these guys have been shooting for so long, it like restructures them.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're shooting arrows every day.
Yeah.
And these guys they're not pulling the bow out a month before season. These guys are shooting competitions, they're traveling the world hunting.
Yeah.
And that's awesome, but I think the average hunter just needs to consider their situation and the effort and work that they put into it. Obviously, if you're out there and you're doing that, you're by all means going to do whatever it is that you're doing. But I know a lot of hunters that if they would dial the poundage back, if they would reconsider some of their arrow setups and they would just practice a little more, they would have a lot more success. But at the end of the day, mistakes do happen in the woods. You get worked up. Guess what? Nature has a say. The deer moves. He jumps a string. You hit a branch that you didn't account for. All that type of stuff. So that is why we're here.
Yeah.
That is why we track, because crazy things happen in the woods.
One of my buddies, Jacob, this year. I mean, he's a great shot with the bow. I do that. I showed you his bear mount earlier. He had one graze a twig, went back and went and got gut. You know what I'm saying? He was distraught about it.
And twigs.
Yeah,
twigs are killers, man.
But I mean, it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
But I mean, shot placement, man. Like nobody. Like if you're not a pro, you might get the ethical argument that I'm trying to put the animal out as fast as possible. Yeah, but I mean, you're going to make him suffer more if you put him in the shoulder. Now he's limping around for another year while he's recovering.
Well, Lyle's tracked deer for some of the biggest names in the industry, right? So like it doesn't matter who you
been
are.
in some of their shows too.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter who you are. Mistakes happen, and that's why we track. We track because we love it, and there's always going to be deer to track, whether you're the most experienced hunter or the brand new hunter. So at the end of the day,
it's getting to a point where people will actually rather you come out.
Absolutely.
Then go look for it.
Yeah, honestly, they just back out immediately and they'll call.
I had three, a dad and two brothers this year I tracked for.
I tracked for a dad, son, and girlfriend.
Yeah, it was a week stand. Like they just like, hey, we're out here for the week. You're like, you found their first deer. I jumped them alive and we followed them a little bit. And I told them, I was like, hey, we're about to cross the property. I'm not comfortable getting on these people's property. I know what Kansas law is and I can, but I want to cross a camera. I know I don't want to mess up their
I don't want to get shot.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's in there hunting. I was like, tomorrow, go knock on his door. Here's the last point of blood. I bet if you go that way, you'll find that deer. Sure enough, next morning they went, knocked, walked. That deer was in the creek 100 yards down the road. So we'd have found that one. They called me the next two deer they shot down there that week, and we went out and found them. So.
Yeah, I have a family down north of Topeka. I went and tracked a deer for the son, and then they had a friend that shot a deer that they ended up not having me come out. I don't know if they didn't have the money or the person who shot it. So they went in. They found it like 175 yards. But then his dad shot one. They couldn't find. He was shooting a crossbow. They couldn't find the crossbow. They couldn't find no blood. So they didn't have me come out. They were like, we're not going to have you come out. So then the girlfriend shot one. I tracked that. And then the dad shot one. I tracked that. Well, after season, I think it was after season. Maybe I'm going to get my time wrong. But they ended up finding the original deer the dad shot. And it was like 200 yards away. And they didn't have anything. So I went to them 4 times, recovered 3 of them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's so popular. People would, like I said, they'd rather, watching a dog work is a beautiful thing. Like, so I mean, that's kind of part of the experience for them too. Now, I think people actually enjoy that. I mean, I had a soldier this year shoot a doe. It was a pretty small doe. I think Robert was probably about the size of the deer, realistically. But he said he had just as much fun watching the dog track this deer as he did shooting that deer. So.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
Yeah,
everybody loves dogs.
Yeah.
So the biggest portion of this is this little piece that we're talking about right now is to put the odds in their favor. So we've hit up a lot of this preparing knowing your shot placements, knowing when to back out. I think that's all real good stuff that people just need to take a moment before they actually go into the hunting season, just think about and just start processing and kind of make that plan. Like, okay, if this happens, because it's always a possibility if they go out. I think too many people just grab their stuff and go out, and they don't think about it's not just shooting the deer. It's everything else that comes after the shot too. So I think this was all pretty good stuff, and if they actually take this into account this year, if they listen to this, I mean, I think that is going to help find more deer this year, to be honest with you. So I really think this is all good stuff. You guys are really killing it.
Yeah, I mean, most of the hunters are out-of-state hunters, and I mean, they're spending thousands of dollars to come out here. So what's another couple $100 to go out and find the trophy that they're not going to get from Nebraska or something?
The other thing is too is outfitters. So I have 4 outfitters that I track for now. Most trackers, depending on where they are, they probably track for an outfitter or 2 or a couple, and those outfitters typically, once you show them that you have a good dog and you're successful, you're who they're calling. Number of reasons. Most outfitters, especially in the state of Kansas, they have a draw blood clause. So if you draw blood, your hunt is over unless you pay another $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to hunt. So for that hunter or that outfitter, most of the time they're going to call a tracker because they don't want their deer that they have, that they're making a business out of, getting out there and rotting and not being found. So I have a tracker that I track. I tracked 2 deer, one that was alive and they had it back on camera with an arrow in it like 3 weeks later. Another one, the same tracker, I tracked another deer and it was alive after like 1.25 miles. And I found 1 pin drop and he just couldn't believe it, and it showed back up on camera at the feeder. But his rule is he will track 100 yards. I think it's like 100 yards, and then he'll stop. Like if the deer isn't laying there, he's backing out. So we did that 1 year, and what ended up happening...
That's a pretty good rule to have right there.
One track, I was like 10 minutes away, and they pulled up, and they were sitting up on the road, the country road or whatever, and they just pulled out their binos, and they were looking, and that deer was already dead, cows tore it up. They saw the glare of the antlers. But I mean, they're like, hey, come and work it, and Bo worked it beautifully, went right to it. It's been like a 300-yard track. But that's the other side of it, right? Like you talked about, they spend a lot of money to come out here. They get a tag once every 5 years or whatever, and so they just don't want to leave a deer laying in the woods and not be successful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, these deer are built different too. Like they may never get an opportunity to shoot something that large. I mean, it can be a 140-inch deer, but back home, 140 might be a state record.
Yeah, if you're from Alabama, that's a stud.
Yeah, I mean, I shot like a real low 130 at Benning, and I'm like, oh man, this is a giant I got here. And the first thing you told me when I got here is like, calm down.
Yeah,
yeah. Like I mean, I've never been out to Kansas. I've always dreamed about coming here. I've always wanted to, and I finally was able to. And you're like, it can be very deceiving.
Yeah.
Like these deer are huge out here, and so I mean, they are.
It's funny.
It's a very different place.
You got to let a couple walk by so you can see.
Really get the perspective of the
their
size
bodies
of them.
Are so big that you don't. It kind of masks how big their racks are. So a 140 out here, based on their body, it looks like a 110. You know what I mean? So until you watch enough of them walk by, or enough time in the woods seeing them, you'll disappoint yourself if you let an arrow fly too soon.
That's funny. I don't want to drag it on any further. I got a pretty funny story about this year. So I'll go out to a guy, and him and his buddy come in from out of state, and he had tagged a 140. One of them tagged about a 140, maybe 145, and he was super excited about it. And we get on this trail, and it was my favorite track to date. We get out there, and we took this deer. I swear to God, I don't know how it had so much blood in its body, but it was a massacre scene for 2 miles. I was like, there was a couple points where like it petered off, and we lost it. I had to let the dog work through, get a couple trails. But I mean, where he would walk through any tall grass, it just looked like someone drug a dead body. 2 miles in, we jumped it alive. We let it go a couple hours. Bro, I've never seen a deer this big in my life. I swear to God, his chest was that wide. It was a 197-inch deer. His buddy's like, I can't even be excited about my deer anymore. The one that shot the 140. He's like, do you want this? He actually gave me all the meat from it. He's like, I don't even want it anymore.
Jesus.
Like, okay, I guess I'll take that.
Yeah.
And I mean, they tipped well. The fee and a full deer. I was like, this is the best day ever.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Bigger the deer, the tougher they are. That's a fact.
Sure
That's
are.
absolute-
Yeah, I don't understand how that deer so much blood for so long. I'm talking a 2-mile massacre scene.
Yeah.
It's
You'll
insane.
notice the does and the young bucks, they just don't put up. It's like they don't have that will to survive. When you get those big, mature 4, 4
I mean,
and a
that's
half,
all they've
5-year-old,
known.
God,
just trying
can
to
do
survive.
They can do some amazing things. It's
They're
crazy.
the most resilient animal I've ever seen in my life in person. Like, I've never seen something with more will to live than a deer in Kansas. So.
Yeah, and just to kind of hit up on this quick, we could talk about this forever, but different times of the year to track, it is so much different tracking in the early season as opposed to the pre-rut and the rut and late season. Obviously, they're amped up mid-season, getting ready to go into the rut. They start breeding, and I mean, some of these deer can get shot and they won't even react.
Yep.
And they'll walk away and they'll really make you second guess it. And so a lot of these guys call too, and I mean, 50 yards later when they're out of sight, they start teetering and then they fall over just over the hill and they end up dying. But
Mike brought
They
up a
don't
good
even
point
know.
in conversation one time with me. Is I think you mentioned that during the rut they're so amped up and they're so much aggression they're fighting that they're expressing a lot of that same scent that they, when they get shot. So I mean they're out there 24/7 fighting.
It's
and
hard to track.
So now the deer's looking for. I mean, the dog's looking for a bunch of deer that are putting off all that scent that's very similar to them being shot. So it's pretty frustrating during the actual rut.
yeah,
The rut, the does too. The does, I believe, are really the ones that are stressed because they're getting harassed and chased. So I think they're putting down a lot of interdigital gland scent. I think the bucks do too. But during the peak of the rut, I have seen where we've got to do more restarts. Early season, we're typically right on that deer.
Yeah.
Late season, we're typically right on that deer if it's dead. I do notice in the peak of the rut, we'll be tracking really well, and then he'll just get worked up. And as soon as I sense it, I'll pull him off. We'll restart, and we definitely do more restarts in the peak.
we talked about that last year. I think it was when you were kind of thinking you were going through a little bit of a rough patch or whatever. I'm pretty sure it was during the rut. So,
Yeah, it was
and
smack dab middle of November.
That's when we were talking about that. You know, it's harder to track just because there's so many different scents, so many different. I mean, there's a lot more hunters.
Yep.
There's a lot more deer being pushed, not just by other deer, but by people. Yep. So I mean, there's just so many different scents in the woods now. At that time, it's just kind of. It's harder to stand the same trail a little bit more, but...
Well, all the animals are more active. Your rabbits are more active because it's colder. Your coyotes are moving around because they've got to feed more.
Yeah.
Everything is moving around. Whereas the summertime, everything kind of stays in a home range.
Yeah.
Kind of tight, doesn't really venture out. During November, I mean, things are moving miles. Those rutting bucks will move miles in a day to get on hot does.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll find some of those bucks in the beginning of the season or near the end of the season in their safe place, their bedding areas that they've been safe. You normally find them somewhere around there, as opposed to some of these bucks that get out of their home range for the rut and they just die in the most random spot ever. You know, especially this tall grass. This tall grass is kind of deceiving. I mean, especially for the hunters when they're out there, it's very hard to see blood on that grass because there's a lot of red in the grass out here. So I mean, even I've been deceived. I'm like, holy shit, you know, I'm like, is that blood? And you rub it a little bit. No, not blood. It's just the grass. So again, around that time of year, it just makes things a little bit harder. But
you brought up a good point real quick about early season and home range. Early season, those deer typically are not going to go far out of their home range. That includes when they've been shot and they're going to die. They will circle back because all they need is food, water, and bedding and security. They can find an area where all that's in a pretty small area. So early season, I typically find those deer are not running very far. Later on in the season, those deer are just going.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Yep. But now we're going to get into something a little bit interesting here. We're going to be talking about dogs versus drones. So I know drones over the last year or two have started to become the hot topic. You don't have to work an animal. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to water it.
Yep.
You just got to charge it. And that's it.
Yep.
And I mean, some of these thermal drones, I know there was a big debate on that and a big investigation through one of the YouTubers who does it. I can't remember the name right now, but that's a lot of people are starting to go to drones now because I mean it's thermal, and they can visually see what they're checking. It's essentially they see what a dog would see almost, but in a sense where the dog is tracking and seeing the scent or smelling the scent. Now all they have to do is use a drone to go check these areas without actually having to walk. So there's I mean, this could be an interesting subject. You could definitely tear this down quite a few ways. So
you want to hit it first?
I mean, for me, I won't say I'm not opposed to it because of my trade craft. I love doing it, and I feel like if it was just something that spread rapid in Kansas, I would probably lose my hobby. From a sportsman piece, I think it's somewhat unfair, but how do you regulate it, right? That's really where it comes back to me, is how do I validate, like, I'm not out there chasing deer, like poaching, let's be honest here. How do I stop? Well, how does the game warden, who's very thin throughout the state, I don't think I've talked to 2 in 6 years ever. How do the game warden know whether or not you're tracking a wounded deer or you're poaching deer? You know? I mean, they won't. You can't know. I think that's kind of my things from a legal standpoint. Whether or not it's fair to me, I think if they were both available, I would probably pick a drone, right? It's probably more effective. It might be a little more.
Yeah, honestly, if you could see a dead deer from the sky without having to take the time or effort to walk to that, and then you can just walk directly to that deer. I mean, it's
you're losing the experience of watching a dog work. It's probably a little faster. But yeah, for me, it's the legal point of avoiding poaching. I think that's really where the difference is, in my opinion. So.
I'll talk about that side first. So first and foremost, I'm for anything that is legal, and I'm against everything that's illegal. So currently in the state of Kansas, it is illegal to use drones to basically pursue game animals. So with that being said, my biggest concern with it would be, just like you said, like, where is the line, right? So if drones were legal to track deer, would they be more effective? I would say yes. From a standpoint, we got to remember a drone is searching. It's only going to search where you put it. A dog is going to track anywhere that deer went to.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's the benefit of a dog. So Kansas, some states where they got smaller, like, parcel properties, I think a drone is absolutely the way to go. But I think Kansas, where it's so vast, I don't know what your longest track is. My longest track is 2.25 miles to a dead deer. That'd be pretty hard to find with a drone, especially if you don't know what direction it went.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is the cost. I've done some research on what some of the drone people charge, and they're charging 3 times what most dog trackers charge. Most of them have a pretty, and I don't want to speak for any of them because I don't want to disrespect anybody. Do whatever your state allows you to do, and if that's your hobby, then do it and do it well. But they do charge a lot. Those drones, I mean, they're not your Best Buy DJI or whatever they're called. Those things are like top notch, $20,000, $30,000 things with, incredible FLIR thermals on them. So I think it's awesome if it's a tool to have, by all means. The time when I would want to have it is those tracks where I keep second guessing myself. But I think 9 times out of 10, I'd probably find that if we did find the deer, we'd see that it's alive. So I have all the faith in my dog and myself. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for the states and the wildlife departments is they just wouldn't be able to regulate it. So I think people would abuse it. Poachers are always going to poach, but I think people would start using it to scout. I mean, think about this. I was thinking about this earlier because I knew we were going to talk about this. Is like, what if, like, me and you are buddies, and I throw up a drone, and you're walking in the morning, and I'm like, hey, you need to move faster. He's going to be at the spot in 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I think it would open up some doors, like, where more people would just abuse it. So I don't think we need it because I think our dogs do it and do it very well. The percentage of dead deer that we're leaving in the woods is so minuscule that I don't think the pros I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And most people can't afford to buy them.
I mean, I would say with the amount of deer there in Kansas, if you're not looking at a dead deer, I mean, and I don't know, I've not looked into it as much as you have.
Yeah.
Like, can you legitimately tell either with thermal or
they have white
whether or
lights.
not the deer?
Oh, they have white lights.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll see it.
They're
Like
getting that
thermal,
close to it?
then
They'll go right down to it. It's wild to see.
They'll turn on a flashlight and they can see it.
I mean, we could. I'd say locally we wouldn't have to worry about it because of the base here, and they'll never allow drones to fly.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's insane. I haven't looked into it that much. The
That-
fact that they're getting that close, but one, you're disturbing wildlife too at that point.
That's the other thing. You have to have approval. All those people have to be licensed or get like some sort of licensing through their local, what is it, the FAA or whatever.
Yep.
So that's the other thing too. Like, there's a lot of loops to go through. But yeah,
Honestly,
if we could,
I would like to see dog trackers have to have requirements as well.
I think so too. I think.
I mean, you're a UBT 1 and 2,
2,
right?
yeah.
I've never done it. I mean, I have all the confidence in the world that my dog would pass that with flying colors, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I've just never been in in a place with, I've got youth sports kids, so I've never been able to just take my dog to go to a test because I think most of them are like 3 or 4 hours away.
Yeah, for where we are. Yeah.
But if it came to it and the state mandated that, I mean, I would be totally for that. Some kind of credential program for tracking teams, like human and dog, for certification for this. I would support that.
Yeah,
as well,
I would 100% get behind
Yeah,
that.
there are, and I know I think we're pretty much done with the drone thing. I think plain and simple, if they were legal, hey, do what it is you want to do. But I just think there's too much red tape for them, and I think people would abuse them. But you brought up a point there. About having certifications, whether it's UBT or the new ABTA, the American Blood Trackers Association. They also do different certification levels, but there are trackers out there that just got old buck their lab, and he's found one of their buddy's deer, and they'll take a call and they'll run out, and that dog truly isn't trained, and more so the tracker that's on that lead isn't trained. He doesn't know how to read it, maybe not know how to read his dog. So for all the hunters out there, like, definitely like look into who you're calling. Most of us have Facebook pages. You can find us on Kansas Deer Recovery page, or our personal ones, and make sure you're reaching out to a tracker that is out there putting in work and that you're confident, and really ask the hunter or ask the tracker questions. If you ask a tracker what their success rate on the on-lead state and they tell you they find 90% of the deer they go on, you probably want to make another phone call.
Yeah.
We'll talk about stats real quick. So on an on-lead state, the national average for on-lead states is about 40 to 45% recovery rate. That doesn't mean we're leaving 60 to 55% of deer in the woods. That means that about 40% of the deer that we're tracking are alive and well. And then there's always that 20-ish% that you never know because the hunter never sees it on camera again because it goes over a property line, gets shot 2 days later. Or it vacates, or they don't run cameras, or that was their last day in the state and it leaves. So there's always that 20-ish%. So 40 to 45% for everything I've seen, all the experienced trackers I've talked to, they say that's the national average for on-lead states. Whereas off-lead, like you talked about earlier, they're about a 60 to 70, some maybe a little bit higher depending on how many dogs they run, what type of properties they're on, and stuff like that. But
not everyone gets the Michael Polito, so I will say it's worth taking a chance on someone that's eager.
You're
too.
right.
So
You're right.
I was a first year guy too, and I will say I sucked.
Yeah.
My dog made me look good in a lot of cases, but the knowledge I gained and the knowledge they're going to gain on every track, if they're serious about it, is invaluable. So I mean, if you can't get the Michael Polito, it's worth taking a chance on a dude.
I fully agree with that because it takes, I would say, it takes a full season minimum to learn this craft, or to, I mean, you're not going to learn it all the way.
Every track.
Yeah,
every track.
100%. But to learn how to read your dog, like, you can't just be switching up dogs, because most dogs are not going to give you the same visual cues that maybe if you have 2-3 dogs. I think you just said you bought a new one, right? So now you're going to have to learn that. That dog's cues, how she works now, and it's not just something you can get into. It's something you have to practice and understand how how to read your dog, what kind of reaction they're going to give you at a certain point. I mean, like Lyle's dog, when she finds the deer, she's going to start barking.
Yeah.
And that's how he knows, okay, yep, he's on her.
Yeah.
And it's okay, cool.
That's a good police. Mine will, like, if I am on a live, like if I go from like where he thinks the deer's dead to where he's live, he starts baying. And it's funny. It's complete opposite. Like, so if I'm not at the deer and he's baying, I know like something's wrong. We're either on the wrong trail or need to pull off.
Mm-hmm.
But like he'll be perfectly quiet sniffing until he gets to that deer, and he'll start chewing on it. And when he's done chewing, he'll start baying.
Yeah. I just want to come back to. I hope I didn't like kind of say something in the wrong way. It wasn't my intention. I started this thing too, right? So I know what that's like. One thing that I made sure I did when I started, I would say the first half of my first season, I told every hunter, hey, this is my first season. This is my current stats. If you want to call me, if you're comfortable, we'll come. I have trackers that I can put you in contact with that are much more experienced. I even said, hey, let me call another tracker to get their opinion, and I would do that. But I just think just being upfront and honest with people is so important, because at the end of the day, whether you find their deer or not, your reputation is on the line, and the reputation of the tracking community is so important. If we leave a bad taste in people's mouth for what we're trying to do, it could spread like wildfire. But I think if we're out there doing good things, which I think is happening in the tracking community, it goes back to what he said, and I think you said earlier, it seems like people are more apt to call dogs because I think they see the true benefit of them. And there's a lot of good trackers out there doing a lot of good work and helping a lot of people.
I'll say, if you're making money your first year tracking, you're doing it wrong. You're for the wrong reasons.
I definitely.
So I was literally about to say that my first year here, they're like, how much do I owe? I said nothing.
Yep, that's the other thing.
I said absolutely nothing. Now, yes, they would tip.
Because the extended drive, maybe a little gas money I asked for, but yeah, it was.
They might $20 just cover gas or whatever, and I didn't want anything. I just wanted to get my dog the experience.
I had people give Bo toys, $20 cash and toys.
I got a dozen eggs from dude. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, when you're starting
that
out,
was gold.
Yeah, I was like, man,
and he'll
fresh
tell you,
eggs.
because when I started out, I was like, hey, I'm gonna do, straight off of donations, tips. I'm not gonna set a price. And then I had people driving me to start charging because we were being successful. And they're like, man, you need to start charging because I burned like 15,000 miles in my truck. I saved all my receipts from last season. I spent like $6,000 during tracking season, gas, food, dog food, vet bills, and all that. It adds up quick. So, but yeah, like straight tips. But I got just as much enjoyment watching Bo get a couple new toys from a lady that I tracked for her husband versus the guy that's out of state and he gives me a $500 tip. Like, I don't care either way. But now that I'm kind of established, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, you're paying for experience.
Wear and tear, wear and tear on your vehicle. My dog gets extremely good food, like $70 a bag.
Yeah.
And I buy, now I'm going to start buying like 6 at a time. Vet bills, all the tick treatment.
Oh, the ticks.
The harnesses, the leads, the food on the road. Like, it adds up. So, we do, and there are some trackers, that don't charge anything. And that's okay. I'm not at a point in my life where I can spend money to do this. I've got to make a little bit of profit to make it worth like my time away from family. My wife knows, like you said, we talk more during tracking season. We talk to our spouses. I mean, I sleep in rest stops. If I've got a track lined up, I'm not going to drive home for 2 hours of sleep. I'm parking on the side of the road, sleeping. Me and Bo are bundling up in the truck together, freezing our butts off because I got to track in the morning. So it's hard work. It is very hard work when you're out doing it.
Yeah, man, I bought a minivan to track in this year because
you
driving
told
that
me.
F-250 was ate me up the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's wild.
But I'm gonna say if there's a lot of people in it for the wrong reasons. However, I think the community, as a whole, we're taming that, especially in Kansas.
Yeah.
Last year, I think the tracking map it was so saturated. This year, we put a little more effort into only putting seasoned proven trackers on there, and I think it'll actually benefit the community as a whole. But people are just trying to make money at some point too, and that's not the right people you want out there. They're gonna show up, let their Labrador get them off the couch, let them walk through the woods a little bit, and then charge you $300. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Man, $300, that'd be nice to get.
You'll get there.
Well, let's talk about fees.
No.
Let's talk about fees. Give people a general idea. So I'll start it off, and I think we both are about the same.
Yeah,
I think we're identical.
Yeah, I would say every year we usually talk about it. I'm not trying to compete
Yeah.
like with my friends that are
Yeah.
down the street from me. I'd rather
Yeah.
be. I don't want to take a track from you because I'm $20 more or less than you. Like,
Yeah. That's exactly what I did because I talked to you, I talked to Ruben, I talked to Shaden, which he's about an hour and a half away. I basically called everybody that's kind of in the bubble, and I asked Brent Dale and some other people, what do you charge? How do you charge it? What's your thought behind it?
Yeah, I
Because
asked you too
I
last
didn't
year.
want to be the cheap guy because a lot more people are going to go to the cheap guy because maybe they're not experienced in tracking dogs and they're not going to look at my Facebook page or look on the Kansas Deer Recovery page and they don't know how successful you are. So I wanted to be right there where everybody else is, but also price myself accordingly for being new, right? When I started charging. So I'll just say what I charge local, which is anywhere in between like 30 and 40-minute drive, right? So basically, like if I drive to the far side of Manhattan, I charge $150. That's my local fee. For the soldiers and veterans that we charge for here on Fort Riley, I charge $100. So it's a little bit cheaper. And then beyond that, I charge $100 per hour of driving. So if I have to drive an hour one way, it's $200. Last year, I didn't have any additional fees on anything. Like some trackers will do fine fees. This year, I'm going to add a fine fee. It does two things. Number one, the cost of food and gas is like almost 2/3 higher than it was last year, I think, if I'm not wrong. So like I've got to account for that. But then two, I think adding that will give those trackers a little bit more assurance that you're truly serious, which I don't think we need it, but I think that's my way of justifying it is the cost of food and gas and oil and maintenance. Everything's higher now, but then also that added approach to, hey, understand that if I find it, I'm going to get another $50. So that's what I charge. If you want to,
no, I mean,
we're
like
exactly
I said,
the
we're
same.
exactly the same. And he and I were talking about that fine fee. I think actually last year
year.
while it was ongoing, because
Yeah.
I think I forget the gentleman's name up. No, he's in like the northwestern portion, but he charges a fee if he finds a bed, like a dead bed, where like they jump the deer alive. He's charging a fine fee. And that's not where I want to go with it.
Yeah.
If I find your deer dead. And I feel like that it shows that I'm not just getting paid and show up to walk through the woods with my dog. Like if you watch me work, you would know that automatically. But you know, it's something for me, a little more benefit. You know, my dog's gonna chew on a deer leg, and I get a little more money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're right on the same. I think I know James is the same, and I think most of the trackers in there are some trackers that charge a hefty fee.
Heck yeah.
I mean, I've heard some people they charge $500 to show up.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. But hey, if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. What I find is charge what makes sense and just be a good steward of, I guess I'll call it a profession or the hobby. Be a good steward of it. I mean, I have got a $500 tip. I've gotten $250 tips, and I've gotten no tip and a hug. I've seen people cry. I've seen fathers cry. So like I could care less about tips or, you know, like I said, during youth, I know you don't charge. During during youth season, none of us charge. We enjoy it. But I've had people say, like, I honestly don't have any money. Can you come?
Yeah.
And I do come.
Dude, late season when we're not like December, we're not getting any calls. Bro, I'll go up just to get the dog off the couch too. I'm bored. Like, hey, yeah, man, I'll come hang out and track the deer for you. Like,
And I think every tracker's the same. We do it because we love it. Our dogs love it. And if there's a situation where you absolutely need it, we're coming. We may put you on the back of the line if we've got other calls, but we're coming. Or we'll get you in contact with somebody that's closer, that's cheaper. I do that all the time.
Yeah,
like if I tell the person, hey, it's $300 for me to come out there, but you can also call Chris Curon, Chris Cavender, Chuck Lucas, you know, because we get calls from all over because, you know, they may see that you're out being active. They may follow your Facebook page and they want you. But they don't realize they're 4 hours away. Brother, I'm not coming 4 hours away because it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but I will get you in contact with somebody who will. So,
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah, see, that's super cool because, I mean, there's a lot of people that are just, we're not gonna sit here and talk about money and everything, but it's awesome that you guys are putting it out there because, I mean, this is the stuff, I mean, it is not easy to do.
it's a business, man. I've
It
got
is.
an LLC. Like I do my taxes.
yep.
It's a full.
Yeah,
I take a month and a half off of legit work to go do this.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So.
Yep. So this is good. This is really good information. But we're gonna go ahead and end this with a couple cool things. One, your wildest story, and then for a track, and then maybe your worst track. So if you guys want to, whichever one you guys really want to hit up on, whichever one's more crazy, y'all go ahead.
I got a wild one, and I'll tell you, this is the one that it's not even a successful one for me. I'll say long term, and it was this year. You actually helped me find this deer.
I know which one you're talking about.
I had a gentleman, I believe he was from Georgia. I if I'm wrong, I apologize if you watch this, but he shot this deer on the one side of a huge river. Like if you're gonna swim it, you're swimming with the dog. Like so, he shot it. He tracked it to the river. He called me. He brought me to a point where he thought the deer had come up. He didn't give me the point where he crossed. I didn't get that information from him. And I asked him for it. I never got it. And it was my fault by not following up.
He was gone, right? He had left. So
No. He met me there that day.
Okay,
but he brought me to a point, and I put the dog down, and I can immediately tell, like, the dog, like, he's just following random stuff at this point. I'm like, what? You know, I'm going to work it. Worked like an hour and a half, and I was like, look, man, I had zero sign of blood. But it ate at me. I'm like, he sent me the picture of the deer. I saw where it was. I'm like, that is a dead deer. Why am I not finding anything? Because he had a camera of it, right? Yeah, he was GoProing it. And I lost sleep. That night, before I went to bed and lost sleep about it, I asked him, I was like, send me the rough. He's like, he didn't mark it, but I was like, show me on Onyx, send me a pin where that deer, like where you had that blood spot. He had brought me like 200 yards downriver to where he thought the deer had come up. And it didn't. I was like, no way, bro. I'm like, I'm going to go back. Like, you paid for it, and I'm interested because it's a good deer. I'm going to go back. So I go right across from where that point is. Immediately pick up a blood trail. And dog goes down 50 yards. Dog goes back down. I look across before we go. Like, I'm not going to cross the river. I could see where that deer went down into the water, and I could see fresh trail. There's nothing else on this beach. I can look over to the left, see where that deer came across, where this blood spot was. I could see where that deer went back across. I'm like, shit, man. I got to get back in the truck. It's like a 30-minute drive to get around this river back to the other side. I get in there, immediately pick it up again. Start going. And then I lose it. I'm like, nothing. No sign of anything. I'm like, I've seen this. Like, I think this deer's dead. So I let him work. And then I pull him off. And I get out of there. I pull back. And we start working. He brings me back to it again. I cut him a little short. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And it was my fault. I peel out. The dude thanks me. You know, he tipped me again, which was great. And I was like, but I'm like, man, I lost sleep. And I told Polito about this one. I think I called you 2 or 3 times in between these
This is
tracks.
the one you had to go ask for permission and then go the next day. Yeah.
And it was such a pain. And then I was like, sometime during the winter when I'm going to go out there again, I'm going to go look, maybe do some shed hunting while I'm out there. And I guess somebody beat me to it. And he sends me a text. He's like, hey, didn't you take a track over here? And I was like, yes, that is the deer. I have proof. Here are the pictures.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, can he send me, I either asked you or asked him to send me the point.
Yeah, it was.
And I dropped the point on my Onyx. That deer was 20 feet in front of where I pulled my dog off.
It was Greg. It was either Greg or Jake Massey that found
Greg,
the buck.
Yeah, 20 feet away, and that was my fault. Crazy story. I've never seen a deer mortally wounded want to go across a river twice. I'm talking. He went up an embankment that was 30 feet tall.
And then he went down it and came right back across for no reason.
Yeah, I have no idea why, but that. Horror. I lost sleep about that deer. Luckily, I looked up the law. The dude gave me the head. He had a friend that actually lived local. I got him so he got a Euro mount of that deer he shot.
Yeah. Awesome. You had to get the salvage tag from you can do a salvage transfer, so they just give you like a transfer receipt. But it ended up being a good story, and unfortunately you didn't find it, but you learned because you just pulled your dog off too soon, and I've done it myself. So I guess I'll go into my story. It's very similar. It's one of the ones that we did not find this year. I guess we can end with the good stories, right? So. So I went and took this track for this guy southwest of here, about an hour and a half. I think it was like down by Salina. And the guy told me, he's like, hey, I was walking into my stand, which is just like he's a little cutout in a cedar, and he's got a corn feeder out there. And he's like, as I'm walking up, I spot the deer at the feeder facing away. So I kind of sneak up and I put a shot on. And he had done everything right. He saw where the deer ran, and well, it ran like 40 yards and it just stood there. He said it stood there for like 10, 15 minutes and it just walked off. So in my mind, I'm thinking telltale gut shot. A lot of times when they're gut shot, they're going to take the hit, they're going to maybe bound away, and they're going to stop and start hunching over. And everything he told me is gut shot. 100%. The arrow smelled like gut. It was gut. And so I'm like, slam dunk track. But looking back, it was like mid-November, and it was like the first cold snap we had. I mean, it was freezing cold when we got there. So, long story short, we get out there. Bo takes the trail beautifully, goes down, finds where the deer had bedded. And then from there, he just kind of went everywhere. We ended up not finding that deer. But we both run a GPS of some sort, whether that's Onyx, I run a different collar, a Dogtra collar. So we're able to keep all our stuff. So I keep all my tracks during the season. For data collection, I tally up how far we track during the whole season, all that type of stuff. So I think it was maybe like 3 weeks later, the guy and his buddy came into town, and they went out and looked. And we went all over that property. That buck ended up being like, we had to have walked within 20 to 40 yards max of that buck twice. He dropped me an exact pin of where they found it, and literally we went right past that deer. The only other conclusion would be that the deer was out of that area, and then when we left, came back and died. But being that time of season, what the arrow told me, what the sign told me, I believe that deer was dead. How we didn't find it, I have no idea. 20 yards, like 20, 30 yards. I mean, I zoomed in as tight as I could to find the exact tree, and I think I measured it at like 30 yards max. So that's a horrible story, but it does happen, and I don't know why. But yeah, those are the ones that you that really like make you second guess yourself. But I just know that we are always going to find way more deer than I ever worry about leaving in the woods, and statistically speaking, I think it's like less than 1% that most trackers are leaving in the woods. So
that's funny.
You gotta lose worrying.
When you're tracking, how much are you looking down versus up?
First season, I looked down way too much. Probably why I made mistakes. And then last year, like looking back when we had that little slump, I think it was because we were not finding deer that weren't dead to be found that I started second guessing Bo and looking down, which led to the mistakes. Now that I'm started 2 weeks ago, started our off-season preparation and training. I am watching Bo like 90% of the time. Like you said, we always want visual confirmation. I think there's always a small bit of doubt. I think maybe some really seasoned trackers, they just watch their dog and let it go and have full trust. I don't know if I'm necessarily there yet. Plus, it's good to see something, right? It's cool to find evidence.
Yeah. It's reassuring.
It's reassuring.
It definitely helps.
Yeah, but I'm telling myself, trust Bo. Be confident in his ability, which I am, but I still think there's a small part of me that
You know how many times
doesn't.
I've been looking down and Robert will stop because he keeps tension. I can tell he's stopping and he's trying to figure out which way, and I've looked up and I'm almost standing on the deer. Like the deer is literally like I take another step and I'm gonna kick the deer, but I'm looking down because I want visual confirmation we're on the right trail.
That happened my first season, and I was like, "Why did he stop?" And I looked up. Oh, he's right next to the deer. I'm like, "Oh, okay, my bad."
Well, he's a fast tracker. He blew by it. He turned around to like figure out which way to go, and he pulled me to the deer.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm saying his eyeballs turn off when he's tracking. It's just that nose. So.
Yeah. I think having your eyes up is super important, though,
I
because
agree.
a lot of safety reasons. You got to be ready for a deer to charge. I have not had one charge it, but there are trackers that have almost been killed by deer. But then there's tree branches and stuff. I had a hunter almost lose his eye. Well, not lose his eye, but he damaged it really bad. I carry an eye patch in my safety kit and my first aid kit now for that reason. So like you just need to be aware. But I think this year I have to really tell myself, just trust Bo. Yeah. Trust Bo, have fun, make it fun. You're going to do well. You've been doing well. And just...
I agree. I think it's something I want to try to work on this year too, because I'm guilty of wanting to look down for that visual confirmation.
And then you miss a read. Your dog could have gave you a read and you missed it.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
All right. Who's telling the first best? Oh, do you have a bad story?
Let's see. Really trying to think. I think last year I was tracking a doe, and we went out there, and yeah, I think it was on Riley. Yeah, it was on Riley. Because I think the next day I had one over in some public land by Milford. But I was on Riley. I was going to track a doe. The hunter was like, nah, it's easy shot right in the lungs. I'm like, okay, cool. Gave it a couple hours. And he said, cool, we'll go out there and we'll check. And I went out, and I really did not trust my dog at this point. And I got to the point where he was kind of coming back to me and going back, coming back to me and going back. He just was not paying attention to anything, didn't want anything, and I was just getting really frustrated with it. And I ended up calling it, and I apologized because I've never seen my dog act like this. Looking back, he ended up seeing that doe limping away later. It was a shoulder shot, but I was very frustrated. I said, I'm sorry. My dog does not act like this ever, and I'm going to end it right now because I'm not going to sit here and waste your time.
Yeah.
And I ended up telling him to call you. I don't know if he ever did or not. But it was a doe, and not to say it's still a deer. But I was very frustrated with that, and it was one of those moments where it was one of the first tracks of the season. But I'm still very new to this too. It's only my second year, and I've not done anywhere near the number of tracks you guys have done. This year I'm definitely putting more time into it because I'd really like to eventually get to where these next couple of years I should have the time to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got super frustrated with it, and I just called it. And only thing that turned out good from that story is that she was still alive.
Yeah.
But
that
that
showed zero interest because it wasn't anything
right
could have done.
And that was my biggest flaw because I got frustrated.
Yeah.
I got very frustrated with him.
Frustrations to get you.
And he came up and he was just jumping on me like we were out there playing, and I'm just like, you understand you're working, like he never does that, and I just got really upset about it, and I called it after about an hour of dealing with that, and I'm just like, I'm sorry.
Dogs will be dogs. Dog has off days just like humans have off days. It's one reason why I got a second dog, for a couple reasons. What if one of them gets injured? When I'm overworking them, kind of like I felt like we went into an area time last year where we were taking like 3, 4, 5 tracks a day, and I just felt like my expectations were too high, and I was probably pushing Bo a little hard.
Yeah. And, I would never tell you that to your face, but now we're on this, and I got a table between us.
No, I
definitely thought you were overworking Bo.
Yeah,
you had so much success, though it's hard to walk away from that to take a break.
Exactly, and that's the discipline. That's like the side of me that really is like maturing in this tracking, is that I have to understand that like Bo is not a machine. And I'm not a machine. I'm tired. I haven't got good food in me. I'm eating road food. This year I'm going to start packing more food. I lost like 30 pounds last year tracking. That's how much we're walking. But yeah, I got a second dog because of that, because I always wanted a Teckle, a wire-haired Dachshund, and now I have one. She's going to be freaking awesome. But yeah, your dog told you everything you needed to know.
Yeah, and being one of the first ones after going through, mock track after mock track after mock track, and seeing him work, but there's a scent.
Yeah.
There's a scent, so okay, he's not on it, and pull him back to it,
Yeah.
And knowing that, I should have known, but I didn't, and I should have just pulled him immediately. The way he was when he first started acting like that, he had zero interest, zero. But
it's tough someone paid you, a certain amount of money, and you drove a certain, so many hours, and you get there and the dog has zero interest in it. Yeah. It's hard to explain to a hunter, which is, I continue to work it for a reasonable amount of time. I'd like to let them call it, but they'll just leave me out there for hours. Looking at it. And at a certain point, for the safety of me, and maybe I have other tracks. Like it's not going to work out, and I have to call it. But I'll make sure they get their dollar's worth out of it.
I try to make sure to tell hunters when I come to the track what the expectation is based on the conversations and dialogue we've had. Yeah. And I tell them, hey, this is what my dog's going to do if we get on a hot track, or if he's telling me this deer's alive. And, it's part of it. I think if you just keep that dialogue fresh with people and tell them what to expect, what the expectations are, they understand what they're going into.
So the first year we had kind of talked about the distance between hunters behind and walking with, and I think that was one of the things that I'm telling you, I think it was my first track of the season is when that happened, and they were close, and so they were constantly talking. And I think I was getting a little bit more frustrated with that. And then they were kind of throwing him off. And, my dog's still a pup. Yeah. He's still a pup. He doesn't know you, so he wants to get to know you, So he gets more interested in the damn hunters than, sometimes than he does actually going out there. And that was my biggest mistake I think I made on that track too, was just not telling them, hey, I need you, this certain distance behind me, and I need you, like, I don't want you any closer than 50 yards.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to stay.
I do a lead length, so I use a 30-foot lead, so I ask them to stay back approximately 30 feet. I ask them to keep the noise down. I will take no more than 2 people, and if I have more than one person, we use sign that we find and we leapfrog, so that way we always have a reference point to come back to. I may give them, if I feel the track is getting long, I may give them some pieces of toilet paper marking clips that I use, and I say, hey, if I call sign out, clip where I call that sign out. It's basically, connecting the dots, because we may have to go back to it.
Yeah, that's how I use them. So I call blood or whatever, blood, sign, whatever it is. Like, that's where I want you. You walk with me while we're up to it. Yeah. But when I say blood, don't move up until I say it again. And then if you're
I ended
far
up doing
enough
the
back,
same thing last year.
If you're far enough back and like you may not see it, I have markers as well that I'll drop. I'll be like, hey, mark. And they'll move up to that, and that's usually where I want them at. They're helping me. I mean, they're helping me help them.
And then they're getting reassurance. So if you call that out for them and come to it, they're staying active in the track. Their confidence is still up. So that's a good side of it. But I use a lead length. That's my rule. I use a 30-foot lead. So just stay back from me. Kind of keep the noise down. If it's nighttime and you have a light, keep your light down. Let me use my light for Bo. Because, light flashing may distract him or whatever, which it doesn't. But I want everything in our favor.
You can have all of the night tracks, boss.
And my first year, I dealt with that whole hunting group thing, and it was on post, and just a bunch of they were young soldiers, and so they were all being rowdy, and it got to the point where I was like, hey, I need y'all to just keep it down, because unfortunately they keep getting rowdy like that. If we're close to your deer and he's still, you're gonna jump him, or you're gonna distract my dog from doing his job. So that was my first time dealing with that, and I was like, okay, cool, never again. And I started going to, I want the hunter who was here and maybe somebody who he explained the story to,
another experienced hunter or something.
Correct. I don't want a big group behind me. I just want a couple dudes. Plus, it'll prevent any more scent being brought into there if I have to backtrack and put the dog back on there. If they're fumbling around everywhere, kicking.
I never had that issue. I mean, I think of one time I showed up and the Orange Army was out there, but they didn't really follow me. So I've never had like more than one or two want to come along. I've had a couple like try to go beside me. I'm like, hey man, stay back. I'll tell you where to go. But I've never had that.
I showed up to one this year for a really big deer. I mean, I think it was probably the biggest deer shot in Kansas this year. And I showed up to a barn of 15 people.
They were drunk, right? Weren't you? I think
they were all good. They had pizza for us and everything. I won't say the guy's name or anything because he had a lot of publicity for that deer, and that's not good when you're in Kansas and you've got really big deer. But I showed up and the whole family and all the buddies from the town were there, and we all drove out to the property. But I said, hey, look, when we were going out there, I said, you guys can come out so we can celebrate if we do find it, but only 2 people were going. I had Brad with me, so it was me, Brad, and I said we can have 2 people
I think
with
you
us.
I thought I remember you calling me. I know you were trying to like talk them down because they were trying to get out there and go track that deer without you.
Yeah. We got there like at 3 in the morning because I had like 3 or 4 other tracks, but that we ended up, I kind of knew that deer was alive, and his buddy ended up shooting it. I think it was like 3 weeks later, and it's like a 240, 250, a freak of a deer. I won't mention the name or anything like that, but yeah, that was like 4 vehicles.
I'm sure there's some people that can put the pieces together.
Yeah. So, well, let's do a good story, right?
Yeah.
Good story. We talked bad ones, leaving deer. You want to start it?
Yeah, I would say 2 that came to mind. One was my first one, but I'm going to leave that one out because it's a little, I won't say it's bad, but it was interesting. But I'm going to talk, I think I mentioned Jacob Golden's name twice. His deer, it wasn't even a big deer this year, but it was probably one of the funnest ones I did. And it was a proud moment for me and my dog, realistically, because of the way, what he had to work through. Fellow's property was an old oxbow on the river that got log jam that rerouted the river. So this whole thing was a dried riverbed with a bunch of steep banks and everything. And it's hard to track someone's property. It wasn't Jacob, but the guy that owned the property was with him. It's hard to track somemeone's property, especially local. I hate tracking for locals because they know everything about their property. They're going to tell you every migrant route that
every deer goes
take.
this way.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was he wasn't bad about it, but everyone's gonna chatter and. But anyway, we get down there, and Robert gets on it immediately. It was a gut shot deer. He told me that he hit the twig, it kicked back. We knew what it was, but I had to get out there earlier than I wanted to. I was thinking it's 4 hours probably, and we talked about gut shot.
Yeah.
I'm expecting this deer's either going to be dead or we're going to push him a little bit. And we got to a point where like we're in a creek bed and there was bluff walls, like 30 feet high, and like you get to the end of it, it funnels up, and the drops of blood take me into it and they stop. And Robert's like, I don't know if it's a scent pull or something. Man, we're circling, and I'm getting aggravated a little bit. I'm like, where did this deer go? Not the dog, just like trying to figure it out. Could not do it. And he brings me over here, no sign. Bring me over here, no sign. Like, man, let's get to the top of this hill. So we had to go all the way in. Dude, as soon as we crest the top of this, the dog crests the top first. That deer jumps. Robert's pulling me up this freaking hill, dude. And I'm trying to get him off, but like just working that scent pool there was really awesome for one. Like him finally figuring it out. And I see it bound off. I tell Jacob, hey, get up there, see if he's laying down, see if you can get another shot. Nothing. Now the deer's gone again. I'm like, well, shit, all right, we're going to give it a little bit. Maybe I've had plenty of deer that we've jumped alive go another 30 feet and die. So we give it probably 30 minutes. We get back out there, and it's gone. Blood drops, drop. So probably another, I don't want to say 400 yards down through a river, up through. I seen a point where this deer's gut slapped the side of a log as it was running by.
Yeah.
I was like, what in the world? How is this thing alive? And then, like, finally it was one of them ones where, like, I'm looking down, like, following the blood. Hey, come on, blood. Look at this freaking liver slapped against the side of this log. Let's go, keep going. And I know that was one of the ones where I'm looking down and I walk on the deer because Robert was tracking so fast.
Yeah.
He blew right by and he pulled me to it. And I don't know. I love a good hot trail. Like dead deer, like tracking a dead deer that's been dead for like 12 hours is fun. It's rewarding. But man, when you get on those ones that you jump alive, but you know are gonna die right there, and you keep moving like that, those are exciting for me. So
they're action packed. There's a lot of sign. You're getting a lot of visual, like assurance. So your excitement's up.
Oh, yeah,
those ones are. They're fun.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, and like I say, it wasn't even like the dude's biggest deer, but he was excited, loved watching the dog. Like the environment was great. Like I loved working. Like he was a friend of mine too, so it was even more rewarding for him to see my dog work. That's one of the things. Like when I can bring a friend on a track with me and they get to see, because I talk about it all the time, but they don't actually get to see it, and like the excitement that they get gets me hyped up.
Yeah.
So that was fun to have a friend. And then they're gonna chatter you up like you're the best tracker in the world.
You're the best. Every deer you find, you are the best tracker in the world.
I appreciate it, and I definitely believe I'm one of the best in the state. And there are a lot of good trackers in this state, and I personally believe you and Bo are the best team in this state by far. But man, like it's really a pleasure when your friends truly believe in you and they plug you like that, and that was exciting for me. So.
I definitely won't say that I'm the best in the state. I have some people that I definitely put above myself. I will say that, like last year, I was fortunate to definitely track a lot just because of the work situation I was in. And some people just don't have that. But there are some guys that have so much knowledge guys and gals that have extreme amount of knowledge. I just think I put myself in a position to track more than other people, so I was able to do that. And I think where we're at in Kansas, we've got more public land than anywhere around here.
There's a lot around here.
Our terrain is different here. So I think this area of Kansas draws more hunters. Because you go west, it's flat and wide open. And you go east, you got city, right? So I just think where we're at here, kind of northeast of here a little bit and south of here, I would say per area, there's probably way more hunters because we got 2 of the largest lakes in Kansas right here, and there's public land all around them. So
that's fair.
I just think I think that's why. So my best story, it's kind of odd because it has a little bit of negative to it, and so it does involve another tracker, but I'm not going to say the name. But it's a wild story, but it's awesome.
You're talking about.
So, and the other reason is. This day was our best day tracking all year. We went 5 for 5, and we started at first light, and I drove all day, and we did 5 tracks, and we found every one of them. So this was the last track. So you would think like going and doing 4 tracks previous, like why are you? I didn't get to this guy till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Well, we drive all over, right? So if I get a call that's 2 hours west, I'm there, I'm tracking for an hour and a half, and then I get another call that's an hour south, or I already had it lined up. I know I'm 3 hours away from home. So you do all that math and all that driving, then you got to stop and get gas. You got to stop and feed your dog. You've got to eat, whatever. So anyway, I got to this guy about 1 or 2 o'clock. It was so late that I was like, dude, I got to stop and get food. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm leaving Topeka, and this property was like northwest of Topeka, right off the highway. He's like, what do you want? I was like, Chick-fil-A. Like, Bo loves the Chick-fil-A grilled nuggets. Like, it's somewhat healthy, and like I don't want to give him like crappy food. So Chick-fil-A was closed, so he got us McDonald's or whatever, and Bo didn't get none, so he was upset. But anyway, the story goes, he calls me. He says, hey, he says, I know who you are. I follow the page. I called another tracker from the page. He came out yesterday. He brought his dog, blah, 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 blah. The moment I knew something was off is he didn't have his dog on lead. So I'm like, well, that's illegal. But whatever, like, you know, you want to do it, like do with what your pocketbook and your, you know, hunting license or whatever can afford. So he says, hey, the guy's dog like went over here. He describes he like crossed a river, and then the guy like grabbed his dog, pulled him off, and then like they went the whole other way. So I'm like, man, that's kind of weird, but whatever. Like maybe the deer's not dead. So at this point that we get there, the track is 40 hours old. And he had another dog there, and I understand like what he's telling me. But the dude is super confident. Like I discussed earlier, I try to pay attention to hunter's experience. This guy's like, I have been hunting this property since I was like 15 years old or whatever. My dad, I think it was his dad or his uncle lives there. He's like, I know this property like the back of my hand, and I'm very confident in the shot I made. I know this deer is dead somewhere. And when someone tells it to you in that way, you can't help but not be confident in it, right? So I said, hey, we're tired, but we'll come, man. I'll give it a shot. 40 hours is... Prior to that, our oldest track was like 29 hours. So for me, I'm like, this is awesome. Like to get the opportunity to try it, like, let's go for it, right? So we get out there. He lets me eat my food. We chop it up or whatever, and then we go to the stand. And he's like, yep, the deer was right here. I can't even like, it was so easy. Bo got on this trail, went down the fence row, went underneath sniffed the barbed wire left and right like he does, went underneath it. I said, we're on it. And they're like, yeah, you're on it. You're right where that deer went. So my confidence is up. We go down, kind of get to the edge of the creek. There's like a little rockway where the deer, you know, they've mowed it out or whatever. We go straight down, cross the creek, go up. That deer's laying there. This is where the tracker had his dog before he pulled it off. So what do you think I found there? We found a deer that's head had been cut off.
Oh, yep, I remember this one.
Wasn't cut. Now, the coyotes had gotten the other part of the deer, but this head was physically cut off. You could see it. Now, this property is, you could literally, I think there's like a rest stop or something. It's right off the highway. And you could, if you knew where this deer was, you could park alongside the highway. I'm pretty sure there's a rest stop, like right where this is. And you could be where this deer was in less than 5 minutes in the dark walking through the woods. It would take nothing. So it's cool for me because it was our oldest track, and it was awesome to watch Bo work a track that's that old. But it's also crazy because in my belief what happened, I believe that tracker saw that deer, and this was a very big deer. It was an 8-point, but a giant 8-point, like a 160, 170 class 8-point, which has got to be wide. It's got to be tall.
Big tall boy.
And the guy had shot one very similar to it on that same property. That is why he wanted to find this deer, because he knew the caliber of it. So I believe that, I could be wrong, but I believe that the tracker went in there, saw that deer, pulled his dog off, and went in there and cut the head off. Because there's nobody else going to this property. You're not just aimlessly walking through the woods, like at night. You know what I'm saying? You're not doing it. So
you submitted that up, didn't you?
I did. Before that, like literally a week before that, I ended up tracking a deer for the son of the head game warden of this entire area. He manages like 4 or 5 counties. I tracked for his son. That deer was alive and well, but I ended up getting his contact. So when this happened, the next day I called him and I explained the story. I said, look, I'm not trying to get nobody in trouble, but like, this is crazy. Like, what do you recommend I do? He's like, well, I'm not going to take the report. Or he's like, if you want me to take the report, I can take it. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I will let the hunter know and allow him to make the report. And I believe the hunter did make the report. Yeah. But it was a crazy story.
Yeah,
so
man, that's wrong.
I can't even.
Would love to know what came of that.
Yeah,
I really would.
I'll probably reach out to him. I have his number on my phone and just say, like, he may not be able to tell me for like legal reasons or whatever, but yeah, like, it's just unfortunate, you know. Some people
I don't
will
want to
do.
spill any tea, but I remember the other one that you talked about that you went out and tracked and couldn't find, and some random dude showed up on the top of a spot where you went straight to. There's magically a deer there.
Yeah, that's a crazy one too. That's a crazy one. Like, that was crazy for a ton of reasons, and I don't want to take much more time.
Yeah,
but
I just enjoy listening at this point.
I'll make it fast. So I get a call from this guy, and this is out by like Lawrence or something like that. So I get a call from this guy. He's like, hey, I shot this deer, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, everything he told me sounded good. He's like, the deer barrel-chested the ground down and then took off. So sometimes that could be a good sign. Sometimes that could be a bad sign. It tells me something of the front shoulders is involved. But a lot of, like, you know, deep penetration deer will do that. You'll just break a part of the bone or whatever. But anyway, so we get out there. Odd thing about this one is, you know, I've never had nobody pay me before I start tracking. So this track, based on the distance, I told him $300. So I get there and like literally, so I have a sheet of paper that the hunters fill out now that has a lot of the questions I've already asked them. It's for data collection. Mm-hmm. Like, I give him the clipboard and the paper, and like before he even starts filling it out, he slaps me $400. So he's already given me a tip I haven't even started tracking. So I'm like flabbergasted. I'm like, what the heck's going on, right? So anyway, we go down. I see his lighted knock. He had picked up the arrow that was broke and put it on top of the feeder. And he's like, this is my stand, and the stand's like 30 feet off the ground. He's hunting it. So I'm like, man, now we're dealing with a high angle shot. So like vitals become like much smaller when you get high angles, right? So all bets are off. And he's like, I know for a fact the deer went that way. Like, I watched it barrel chest and go that way. So I go right where I could see visually where like dirt is moved. But there's nothing. There's not a lick of hair. There's not blood. Bo never gets interested. So we end up going, and this property is like 8 acres, and it's like a corner piece, and it's got fence all around it, right? So I'm thinking front half of the deer's messed up, so probably if he's jumping fence, he's going to leave some hair or something like that. Yeah. Well, anyway, we searched this entire property. One thing I forgot to mention is when I'm 10 minutes away, he calls me and says, hey, when we were out looking for it before we called you, my father was out here and he has dementia or something, and we lost him for an hour. So I'm like, okay, now there's 3 people that were stomping around out here. So I'm like, this is crazy, right? So anyway, we searched this whole thing. Before I even am done, he leaves. Him and his girlfriend or wife, they left. They didn't tell me or nothing. So I'm out here walking through the woods in the middle of the night, tracking this deer, and they up and left. So I'm calling this guy, texting. Finally, he texts me. He doesn't even answer my call, and he's like, hey, I had to run I think it was his girlfriend. I had to run my girlfriend home. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I said, okay, I'm going to get Bo some water and food. We're going to do a reset here, and I'll be up at the truck waiting for you, and we can give it another shot. Because, like, I'm going to make every effort. Like, I'm not just in here. I'm in 1 minute and out the other. I sit there for 20 minutes. I think I sat there for 40 minutes. Nothing. Well, the good heart in me, I'm like, hey, Bo, let's go give it a shot. So we go down and we spend another hour and a half. So now at this point, I think it's like 1 a.m. Go back up. I try to call as we're walking out. I think I called like twice. Nothing. So now I'm worrying, like, did they get in a car accident? Like, did something happen with his dad? So I'm genuinely concerned. So anyway, I leave, and as I'm pulling out, I send him a long text like, this is what I think we could be dealing with. I hope everything's okay. Like, I hope your dad's okay. Like, I haven't heard from you. Like, I'm genuinely concerned. Like, I'm a good-hearted person. So I leave. I get to work, right, the next day. I get a text, like at 10 a.m. He sends me a picture of the deer, and he says, hey, we found the deer. Well, in the back of the picture of the deer is a dog, right? I look at the dog. I'm like, it's got a collar on it. No, I don't see a lead. Maybe the lead was unconnected. But so obviously I'm like, well, who the fuck is that? Like, just a buddy. And then I'm like, okay, I always tell people, the few that have been found that we've left in the woods, I say, send me a pin so I can look at my backtrack and see where we messed up. Were we just way off of it, or were we like close? Yep. So he sends me a pin, and it's literally like we've walked all around that thing. Like, this property's 8 acres. We covered every inch of that from fence to fence and everything in between. And you can look at the picture of the deer, and I am very confident that this was a cover for something illegal, in my opinion. And I put all the things together. I put the fact that the hunter left after he paid me $400. Like, are you going to do that? Are you going to drop somebody the money and $100 tip and then just leave? No, you're not going to do that. And then everything was, it's wrong to me. And I called a bunch of people and explained the story. Like, yeah, Lyle, actually I called Lyle, and he's like, dude, that's a cover. Like, that just doesn't sound right. And I could be wrong, but it was that one messed with me for a long time, because it created, I ended up finding out whose dog it was or whatever. And there was
he started chirping on social media.
Yeah, there was just some bad blood or whatever. But I've let it go, man. Like,
hey, he finds 90% of his tracks, man. You better put some respect on
him. Yeah. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to get into it. Like, I'm in this because I am diehard into this. I am 100% in love with it, and that's going to happen. I'm going to have tons more experiences. There's going to be a lot of good. There's going to be way more good, but there's going to be some bad things that happen. And at the end of the day, like, as long as my heart's in it and I'm doing it for the right reasons and I'm making happy hunters and happy family members and whatever, then I'll keep doing it. I don't think I'm ever going to stop doing this. So.
Nah, man, I'm already looking. I'm trying to convince the wife to let me get a second dog too, because
I know one that's available right now.
I got. I think I'm gonna go. What's the not the one road?
Bavarian Mountain Hound.
Bavarian Mountain Hound.
They're beautiful dogs.
Yeah, and it won't be 115 pounds.
They get up
through the
like
woods.
60 to 80
yeah,
to 90.
That's still half is what I'm dealing.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful dogs,
yeah.
though. Yeah, they're good dogs.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's some crazy stuff right there.
Yeah,
I haven't dealt with anything like that yet. I mean, I've had some like give me money immediately or try to anyway, and I'm just like, no. I said I don't want it yet, not until after.
I tried. The guy was insistent. I was like, okay.
I've been burned a lot, and especially early in my thing with not getting paid up front. So that's why I didn't do any after money. It's you pay me to show up, and I'm gonna work hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just be cautious with that too. As you get more experience, people, they're not happy that you spent 3 hours in the woods and didn't find their deer. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, you're not getting anything out of me.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Well, that's why I usually when I take the phone call, I immediately, I tell them, hey, check it out. Like, understand that this is not a guarantee. Mm-hmm. Like, I just want you to know that. And a lot of times they're like, yeah. And it's like, well, I just want you to understand, like, you're paying for me being there and doing that thing, or
putting
at least trying to do it,
doing what you couldn't do, what
humans can't do.
Exactly. So, like, we're making every effort. And, a dog, I just put this out there, the dog should not be the last resort. Mm-hmm. It is your worst last resort and your best second resort. But it is the worst last resort. If you use a dog as the last resort, the probability of recovery is diminished for multiple reasons that we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. But that's a good way to look at it. So.
Yep. But yeah, and I mean, my good story, and I mean, it's a simple one, but it was first buck I ever recovered here in Kansas, and I mean, it was a fairly long one. I would say it was probably about 1,000 yards, and I mean that was long. That was long for me.
I mean,
that's a long way.
Yeah,
it is.
A deer that's dying good to go 1,000 yards is a long way.
400 to 600 yards is a good one. Anything over that's considered long.
Yeah, and it was down in a very steep, almost like bowl, and it literally walked the entire edge of that bowl all the way around, up over the ridge, and then back down. And when we came up on it, I mean, it was just the best thing seeing my dog actually work, because there was no blood, none.
That's
and there was for about 50 yards, and then it would be like a spot, and then a spot, and then after about 400 yards, nothing. And I was just like, oh boy, this is like the first legit.
Was it a pass through?
No,
Okay.
it
Bleed
broke.
internal. Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, it
Makes
broke
sense.
off. He said it hit the other shoulder and it snapped. And when we got up to it, we confirmed that. But there was no blood, and so I'm thinking, why is this deer going up over the ridge? And that's when you start second guessing. And it was the first actual track that I've had no confirmation, and so I'm like, oh boy, you know, first year I'm out there, but it was such a almost like a relief, as in, okay, the work that we did paid off. And, you know, it just validates everything that you've trained, everything that you put the work and the time into, and just, it's just awesome experience.
It's validation that you and your dog.
Super rewarding. Yeah. It was probably the most rewarding track that I've done, and probably that I'll ever do, mostly because it was the first one, you know. But that's my awesome story. Simple, but I mean, it's that validation that, damn, this is legit, you know. Using these dogs' noses, I mean, we never would have found that deer, ever. He laid up in that, you know, when he went down back into a draw. And it's that tall grass that's like taller than you.
Tall CRP.
Yeah, and it was just a little patch of it.
Yeah.
And he laid down right in the middle of that. Never would have found him. And all of a sudden, my dog starts like getting all like little jumpy. And then he's like sneaking in, and he snuck in.
Getting that
and there he was. Yeah. Yep, 100%. But again, you know, just the validation of it was the most rewarding track I think I'll ever have.
That's
so
awesome, yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But I think that'll wrap it up for this podcast. Yeah, this is a pretty good one. But I thoroughly enjoyed this because, you know, being so new to this still, and talking with some experience here, like not just some, but a lot of experience between the both of you. I can't imagine the hours that you guys have put in over the years. And I mean, hell, you in 2 years have put in so much, and you said you've been doing this for about 5, right?
I think 4. Yeah, 'cause I did miss 1 year for deployment, so I'm like 1 year ahead of him. But obviously, we've tracked the same amount of seasons because I was deployed for a year.
Yeah. So I mean, that's awesome. A lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that we were able to share and kind of put out there to everybody, and kind of, you know, give them a little bit of a perspective as to what y'all do and what we try to do and what we try to achieve by not just getting the hunter their deer, but it's respecting the animal at the end of the day, because we're not just out there, at least 90% of the hunters out there, hopefully more, I hope to God more, but I'm just going to lowball it. 90% of the hunters out there, yes, they want the rack, but it's the meat, and it's being respectful to the animal out there, and you're taking the life, so you want to do everything that you can to recover that, and that's what I think. After hearing some of your stories, that's what I think most of the deer trackers are all about. So, and I think that's a key thing to let all the other hunters out there know. Like, listen, like, we're going to put the time in. Like, you call us, we are going to go there and we are going to do the job.
Yeah.
And whether we find it or not is a whole different story. However, we will put in that time and the effort and give it everything. So, I just want to reiterate the passion that you guys have, and that the deer trackers and hunters and just everyone in general in this community has towards these deer, and that's what it's all about. Yeah. So I think that was definitely expressed in this, and I really truly hope that people watch this and listen to it, and gain a little something out of it, because I think we could sit here all day.
Yeah,
we could sit here all day and talk about this. Could be an 8-hour podcast, but I mean, just the gist of it from here, I think a lot of people can take and hopefully improve their hunting season, maybe their outlook as to why dogs are used. People think it's cheating for some reason, and I don't know why, but I've heard it multiple times. Oh, you're using a dog to find it, but you couldn't. Yes, I want to do everything we can to find the animal.
When I watch a human get on all fours and find a deer that has 0 sign, like there are certain terrains where you are not going to find hoof prints. There's just things that happen. Yep. They cross roads. Like if there's no sign, and what if it gets on the road and it goes down 100 yards? Like you can sit there and walk around aimlessly, and you may, trip over it, but there have definitely been tracks. I don't know anybody who's tracking a deer with like no blood, no sign for a mile or more. And oh, by the way, property lines that you don't maybe have access to. I've used game wardens to get access. Like we don't need access. I had a situation where I had to call the game warden, and he gave me specific directions on how to go about it. But like, just I think you hit right on the head. Like,
there's gonna be haters in every community. You can go any sport, any activity, anything in life, and there's a 20% population that think you suck at something, or it's not how it should be done. So, I mean, don't pay them any mind, and they'll go about their way.
Yep.
And they'll end up calling you because they need a tracker.
But you said something. I had a thought. It's not just about the hunter; it's about the hunter's buddies and stuff, right? Because what happens when you shoot a deer? You're calling somebody.
Hell yeah.
I'm calling somebody. Everybody typically either sends a message, their girlfriend, their wife, or whatever. Well, when they don't find the deer, that has been told to somebody. So maybe it's the hunter who doesn't know about this, but somebody who listens to this friend is in the situation. He goes, oh, like I know a tracker, whatever. So it's we need to spread the knowledge, and, hopefully we find as many deer as we can.
Yeah.
It'll be a good year.
Yep. But Mike, Ruben, truly appreciate y'all coming on here, and hopefully this gets out there, and hopefully guys listen to this and take a little bit from it.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate you having me on here bumping my gums.
Oh yeah, I mean this is what it's all about here, and I love talking hunting. I love talking outdoors. I mean, you and I have talked for hours.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, how can you not about a sport like this? You know what I mean? So. Truly enjoy it. Everyone that has to do with the hunting community, the tracking community, everyone's passionate. Yeah. So, in one form or another. So
I would have very few friends if it wasn't for hunting or tracking. Like, because I'm a pretty isolated person. I kind of keep to myself.
I'm not sure what I would do with my free time if I didn't do this stuff.
We won't go into that. Keep that out.
Yeah. But
you want to give your Facebook page? You got a Facebook
page? So Facebook page, Kansas Outlaw Deer Recovery. That's primarily where you'll see everything. I use my personal Instagram to post pictures too, but that'll be where you'll find us. I think Kansas Deer Recovery, where you and I are both on that map, so that's a good source for every hunter as well. So.
Yeah. Some of the good sources, just for everybody, United Blood Trackers has an interactive map. You can click on the state, and then you'll have a list, but it doesn't allow you to break down where they are. It has their number, their location, and then trackers can put a short little bio on there, so you can do that. Then you have a fairly new one that's really interactive and advanced. It's called the Tracker app, TRAKR, a gentleman by the name of Shane Simpson. Everybody, if you're in the hunting community, you know who that is. He has an outstanding tracking dog, and he's one heck of a hunter, part of the Hunting Public crew. But yeah, it's TRAKR. It's very interactive. You could plug where you are, and then it works by putting the plug out to all the trackers that are a member of it. So you have that one. And then our biggest one here in Kansas that everybody needs to have on Facebook is the Kansas Deer Recovery. It's called Kansas Deer Recovery. Yep. Is it Kansas Deer Recovery?
Kansas Deer Recovery.
Yeah, Kansas Deer Recovery. I run the map, and I can't even think of the name. But yeah, it's Kansas Deer Recovery. Like that page, and you'll see all the trackers. It has an interactive map. You click on it, you can hit your location pin, and it'll pull you, and it'll show all the trackers closest to your area. So always call the trackers closest to your area because that's their core area. It's just out of respect. But a lot of times if you call them and they're tied up in tracks or they're at work, they're going to refer you to a tracker that they have trust and confidence in, or another local tracker. So again, just have that information out there. And then my personal Facebook page is Bodacious Deer Tracking, spelled BEAU dash DACIOUS, deer tracking. It's hard, but Bodacious, named after like the famous bull. So my dog's name is Bo, but I call him Bodacious Deer Tracking. But that's my Facebook page. I have a YouTube page, but I got to figure out this GoPro thing. I'm gonna have you help me because, like, dude, it's confusing. Like, I know how to use it. Like, it does incredible footage, but I need to get better at it. But
there's no way I could wear one, man. It would get ripped off halfway into the first track.
So I'm gonna work. I'm gonna work on that. But I post a lot during the season. I like people to see, and I think people enjoy it. And then
I love watching videos. I don't think I could personally run a GoPro with. And I'm a minimalist. Like, it's fitted T-shirt, tight pants, trying to get through cedars.
Yeah.
So man, thanks for having us, Nick. I know I reached out to you like a week or two ago and just asked because me and Ruben here, I think we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna get a strictly tracking podcast where we call into trackers all over the state, all over the country, out of country, and just like spread the knowledge. Like, it's the stories alone are awesome. I would love to have like a guy like Al Sherman on the podcast. I mean, that guy's been tracking longer than any of us around this table have been alive, and he tracks bear and deer and everything you can think of. That man has probably got stories for days.
Like Brent on here, man. He would,
Brent Dale.
More tracking in one season than you and I probably have in our whole life. So I mean, I call him every time I get in a pickle.
Great source of knowledge.
I think a good one would be calling Lyle and having him on there and kind of getting the differences too between the on lead and off lead. That'd be an awesome one to do. So
I'm gonna venture up to Nebraska this year and try some off lead myself. So
cool.
Cool. I'm not letting Bo off lead.
But
we'll give it a whirl.
But I look forward to seeing y'all's podcast when it comes out too, because I'll definitely be watching it, definitely be learning. I'm always going to call you because that's what I do when I am struggling or trying to figure something else out that I don't know that you probably do. So, and I'll definitely be reaching out to you now as well.
Absolutely. So, I'm always open.
The more people you can reach out to, because the way that I perceive something and give you an answer, like when I'm asking questions, I don't just call one tracker, even though I have the utmost respect and vote of confidence in them. But I'm going to call multiple to get different perspective and then kind of tie it all together. So, like, it doesn't matter. The most experienced person, their way of perceiving it might be different. So, like, if you can get that knowledge from multiple people and kind of come to your own conclusion, that's like huge.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming here. And you guys know where to find me. I hunt because I'm hungry. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. That's what I do. And be looking for more hunting videos coming out. And I think we got some good deer this year. I think we got some big deer this year. A lot of big deer here. So super excited and can't wait to get out there. So,
did you draw a cow tag?
I did.
Yeah, so we're just going to leave that out. So, you drew a cow tag.
I drew a cow tag this year for elk.
A year ago, you got to do my video.
2 years ago, I did your cow video. And last year, I did Chris's bull. And this year, I was incredibly lucky and fortunate to
draw a cow
tag. I looked that day and...
Hope you got a couple deep freezers.
I already plan on buying another one.
Well, if you need somebody to video it, man, I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'm down to do it. I'll have a blast. You did the favor for me, and I'd love to return the favor. So.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And we know where to find them.
We do.
So
we do.
It could be a quick hunt.
And I was hoping for the any elk tag, but at the end of the day, it saves me about $2,000 for the mount. So I'm in that sense, it's okay. But the meat will be amazing. I've always wanted to shoot an elk, so I'm really looking forward to that. But again, be looking out for more podcast videos to be coming out and some more hunting footage to be coming out. So, and then I know these boys will be putting their stuff out too, so make sure y'all look out for that. And let me know when you guys figure out what you're going to call it, because then I'll start plugging. We'll plug and play.
We'll need your help getting it started.
Yeah.
We'll get it done.
My initial naming thing is called Tracker Tales.
Tracker Tales.
Yeah, that's the initial thought.
That's a good one.
Simple.
I like it.
But we're gonna kick it around a little bit. So
cool. Once we figure it out, we'll put it out.
Yeah.
So appreciate y'all again. Thanks for watching.